affirmative. Jane Moran.
Jane Moran, present. I can hear you.
Deb Feinbrugh.
Deborah Feinberg, and I can hear you as well.
Dave Paul.
Dave Paul, present.
Sundar Sivarman.
Sundar, present.
Muriel Kramer.
Muriel Kramer, present.
And Mary Larson Marlowe. Mary looks like she's muted.
Unmute. Okay, there. I couldn't unmute myself. Yes, I am present.
Okay, and just so everyone knows, Rob Benson, our vice chair, is not able to join us tonight. He had something come up unexpectedly, so we will only have 7 members of the planning board this evening. And then for staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. So Mr. Gelsich.
Gelsich here, and I can hear you.
Ms. Pemberton.
Stephanie Pemberton here, and I can hear you.
Great. And is Mr. Paradise here?
He will not be coming.
Will not be here. Okay. And then we do have some anticipated speakers on the agenda. I think it is just going to be Pedro Rodriguez and his crew from Seaboard Solar. And Mike and Nick, I see there as well. Okay, so I think we've got everyone there. Again, good evening, everyone. This opening meeting of the Hopkinton Planning Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with the Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. And actually, I'm going to apologize. I never actually moved to open the meeting. So I'll call to order the Planning Board meeting for July 27th, 2020. So I apologize about that.
So moved.
Second. Mary Larson Marlowe.
Thank you. And we don't need to vote on that.
Okay.
Correct, John?
No.
Okay.
Just got to open the hearings.
Yep, got it. And we will do that shortly. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we are complying with the executive order that suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings at a publicly accessible physical location. All members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The executive order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely as long as the public body makes provisions through adequate alternative means to ensure interested members of the public are provided reasonable access to the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment, will further include one public hearing. For this meeting, the Planning Board is convening by video conference via Zoom app as posted on the town's web meeting calendar and the board's agenda identifying how the public may join. Additionally, the meeting is also being broadcast by HCAM through one or many of its channels or platforms. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that others may be able to see you and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of the body are available on the town's website via the web meeting calendar unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We'll shortly turn to the meeting agenda and I'll quickly run through it just so everybody knows what we have in store for tonight. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will invite board members to provide comments, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking, and please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in dialogue with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. Not every agenda item will feature public comment. For items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment as follows. The chair will first ask members of the public who wish to speak to identify their names and addresses. Once the chair Well, I'll call on people by name, and I do ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. So really quickly, and before we get into the public hearing we have scheduled tonight, we do have some administrative items to discuss. The first being just some discussion on the solar overlay town meeting article that we mentioned last week, and hence Attorney Bertram is here to provide some additional information and clarity for us. We have a couple of other administrative items related to Legacy Farm South trees. We have some board appointments to take care of tonight and a Form K lot release. I anticipate the bulk of our meeting time this morning will be for the continued public hearing for the solar special permit at 71 Franklin Road. And then lastly, Muriel has requested some time to discuss the master plan action items. I think this is really important. This is something that I think this is something that we all care a lot about, and sometimes we get a little, we tend to not reserve the right amount of time for these non-hearing related topics. So I would like to make sure that we allocate some minutes at the end of the meeting to discuss that. So since we're talking about formalities, let's go ahead and we can open the public hearing now, and then we'll move into the administrative items quickly. So at this point, I will entertain a motion to open the public hearing for the solar special permit for 71 Franklin Road. And maybe since our vice chair is not here, maybe Muriel, if you can make the motions, and Dave, if you can second them, if you're in agreement, that will help us maintain some
moved.
efficiency.
Second.
Okay.
Or
Discussion.
Dave Paul, second.
Thank you, Dave. Discussion, hopefully not. So we'll move to the roll call vote. Gary Trendle, yes. Jane Moran,
Jane Moran, yes.
Deb Feinberg,
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Dave Paul,
Dave Paul, yes.
Muriel Kramer,
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Mary Larson Marlowe,
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Sundar Sivaram.
Sundar Sivaraman, yes.
Okay, thank you all. So, so first administrative item again is the solar overlay town meeting article. And John, I'm glad you're back. So welcome back from vacation. Do you want to just provide a quick summary of why this is back on our agenda for discussion?
Sure. So the overlay district that was voted to be recommended for approval at town meeting, I talked to town council about that. And it turns out that the assumption that the planning board was working off of, where if an application is submitted for a special permit prior to the notice of a public hearing for a zoning change, it's grandfathered in. That's incorrect. It's actually got to be issued a permit prior to the notice. So since it was explicitly stated in the vote and in the deliberations that Franklin Solar is grandfathered in, and the board voted to remove it from the map, we thought it in the best interest of the board to revisit this and discuss it and figure out the next path, or the path to move forward on, and the next steps to be taken.
So if I can just, does everybody, do all the board members understand?
I do not. Can I ask a question? Mr. Davis?
I do not either.
Okay.
So my question is, so
Hey, Dave,
Sure.
Dave, actually, let's hang on just 1 second. And
Sure.
I wonder if it's worth, Brian, from a legal perspective, if you can provide a little bit more clarity or build off of what John just walked through.
Sure, I figured this would be my cue. So the issue tracks back to the statutes. In some aspects of regulating structures or what have you, stuff gets grandfathered in when you have an application in, but it doesn't happen with zoning. The applicable song and verse here is in Chapter 40A, Section 6. And what that statute says is that you have to, it has to be a lawfully in existence use or something for which a special permit has already been granted prior to the first publication of notice for the public hearing for the zoning change. And so you don't get grandfathered in simply because you have an application in. In this instance, you would already have had to have issued the special permit for the project to have been grandfathered. So what that means, just for any project that may be lingering out there, or for this one in particular, is that you can proceed with your process and issue a special permit. But right now they're in sort of this gray area where when we get to town meeting, if they vote to adopt the zoning change, that special permit will have been for naught. If town meeting rejects the zoning change, then all is good for that special permit. But if they vote the zoning change and this project is outside of where you've designated the solar overlay district to be, then it doesn't matter. And that risk is really on them at this point. Hopefully that clarifies it a little bit. I'm happy to ask or answer any questions that anyone has on it.
So, Dave,
Yes, that
you got a
actually
question. I'm
answered.
not sure if Brian answered it, but do you have another question?
Yes, he did answer it, but I just want to make one comment. So my confusion was, I thought that it might take place when the article was approved. So that would, put them back in play. But I just found out from Mr. Bertram that it's actually when the article is publicly notified. So that clears it up. Thank you.
Yep.
And Sundar, did you have a question as well?
No, I think Mr. Bertram clarified it. So what I'm getting out of this is, regardless of, so our conversation, our discussions here, eventually there is a possibility that it's a moot point if the town agrees with the zoning change. Is that the long and short of it? But we still have to continue. We, of course, will continue with this process. Is that a fair way of putting it?
So 2 points to make there. One, we want to make sure that this discussion around the overlay doesn't weigh in on our evaluation of the special permit. Secondly, I think you might have just had that a little bit crossed. If the town opts to not approve the zoning overlay, then there is no impact on the special permitting process.
Okay.
If the town were to vote and approve it, then that overlay district would override the special permit. Brian,
Right.
did I explain that correctly?
That's correct, right? Because they're seeking a permit at a location that isn't included in the new overlay district. So if the overlay district goes into effect, then they have a permit for an area they can't build.
So I've got, the way I've thought about this is that we've got a couple of different options as to how to proceed. Before I outlay those options, are there any other questions with regards to this? Yes, Jane.
Okay, so to the town council here. How does Mass General Law 40A Section 3 play into this, where my understanding is town council has already said, come back with another plan because the way it's written probably won't pass muster with the state. Will this, the way it's written, it doesn't look like it's going to stand up to Attorney General muster for approval. Is that your understanding still?
Well, I think we have concerns with it. I don't know that I want to go so far as to say it won't stand up. And if you'll permit me, I'll take a few minutes to explain that a little more. So first, just solely based on the Attorney General's process, I actually think the Attorney General would approve it. But you have to understand that the Attorney General's process looks only at the four corners of the bylaw itself. She wouldn't even look at the map. And so you would most likely get an approval, but it would come with it what we call an Attorney General's caution, that it may not stand up in the future under a court challenge. That's in fact what's happened in a few other, at least in one other community that I know that has a solar overlay district. But that approval notwithstanding, you still could absolutely face a lawsuit over this by perhaps a developer or somebody who wants to develop. And our concern, we definitely have concerns. This proposed bylaw came to us sort of after the ZAC process. We really didn't have a lot of input into it. And I think our chief concern is that when we look at the area that's been designated for the overlay district as compared to sort of the entire area of the town, it's not a huge chunk of the town. And, you know, the statute itself basically says you can't prohibit, and you're fine there. This is not a prohibition, so we're good with that. But you also cannot unreasonably regulate the installation of these facilities. And what the issue will become is whether you have unreasonably regulated them by so constraining them to certain locations in the town. And, you know, it really is a question of, you know, the more land you devote to these, the less likely it is that you have unreasonably regulated, and vice versa. The difficulty with any kind of test that's based on reasonableness is that everybody's concept of reasonableness is a little bit different. And unfortunately, right now, this is the second to last paragraph of Chapter 40A, Section 3, there really just aren't any court decisions out there that give us a lot of information about how courts are going to look at reasonableness. So when we wrote our letter after the ZAC process into the planning board, we were expressing concern that there's not a lot of areas designated on this map, and we're concerned that you could be subject to a lawsuit where somebody might win saying this is an unreasonable restriction to too little land within the town for this type of use. You know, I wish I had a more definitive answer on it. Unfortunately, I don't. As town council, I spoke with Ray earlier. We would like an opportunity to go back with the map and really sort of dig into it a little more, to really think about, you know, whether we've got this, you know, exactly calibrated to the best defensible map. But ultimately, that's a decision for the planning board.
So from an options perspective, I see 3 potential options and want to get input from the board on what might be the best pathway forward for us. So option 1 would be to allow the process to continue, to leave the recommended article as is, and see what happens. We did vote on it. We voted to recommend it for town meeting. So that's certainly one option. Option 2, and I'm not sure if this can be done in time, given the noticing requirements, but option 2 would be to reopen, to conduct a new hearing, reopen this article, and reevaluate which parcels we include and don't include. And we attempt to do that before the September town meeting. Option 3 is that we withdraw the article and we send it back to zoning advisory committee and ask zoning advisory committee to put some additional diligence into evaluating which parcels should be considered, as well as, you know, I think to some of our discussions in the hearing, some discussion around what makes a well-suited property for a commercial solar installation. So personally, you know, my take on it, I actually have a preference for option 3, and I've thought a lot about this and I've struggled a lot with it, because I really do think that we need some additional guidance on where solar belongs. At the same time, I think that this has been a tricky hearing process anyways, and I think that we've learned a lot through it. From a timing perspective, you know, the same rules that applied to us this year apply next year as well. And given that town meeting has already been pushed back, I don't think we lose as much time in getting something like this implemented as we would under normal circumstances. So that's just my personal opinion, but I'd like to open it up to the group and see if people have thoughts on how to best move forward. And Muriel, I see you patiently waiting. I know you're eager to raise your hand. So Muriel, the floor is yours. The mic is yours.
So actually, I have an additional question because we have the benefit of having Brian here. Is it possible, because we have a placeholder article on the warrant, is it possible to consider a moratorium while Zach looked at that further for a year?
I don't think so. I mean, the warrant is what the warrant is at this point. And it's to amend the map the way it is. I mean, no, I mean, so through the annual town meeting process, no, because we're also within the 90 days to put something on that. Now, you can always call a special within the annual. You have to ask the select board to do that. And as a lawyer, I'm obligated to tell you all your options. So there is that.
I was really looking for sort of a clean option, a clean question with the way the warrant stood today.
Yeah, I honestly, I mean, the policy is your decision to make, but I do agree with Gary in terms of, town council's view that, perhaps withdrawing the map and really spending a little time with it is probably your best option, just particularly given that, you seem to have had some surprises along the way here, to make sure we're really digging into this. And, from town council's perspective, we want to make this the most defensible that we can, and make sure it holds up. So,
Well,
I don't really know if there's.
I guess I would suggest, Brian, that we've had plenty of time and town council could help us look at that map between that. Yeah, I mean, if we're opening, we'd have to open the hearing again.
Yeah,
to
we'd have to, you'd have to go through the hearing process again if you were going to add another parcel or change another parcel on it. If you're going to change the map at this point, you actually have to call a special for that too. The charter says you have to, have all the warrant stuff in 90 days in advance of the annual town meeting. And while it's been postponed, we're actually about 60 days out of the new date at this point. So it just procedurally, it is a little bit complicated at this point. It's doable, but it's a little complicated.
Yeah, I'm still mulling how I feel about my options, but I wanted to ask that additional question while we're talking about it.
I just want to make one other point too, and I do feel very strongly about this overlay district, but I also, not only am I thinking about defensibility in court, but I'm also thinking about ability to get this through town meeting. And part of me just wonders if we have a higher likelihood of getting it through town meeting if we do actually withdraw it and really think through all that criteria and those properties and put forth something that is going to be much more difficult for people to challenge. That's just my personal take, but are there others that have thoughts on this subject? Yes, Dave.
So I want to take the opposite approach. We've been kicking this around for a number of years, and nothing's been done. In the meantime, we keep getting more and more clear cutting of trees. You can remember on Wilson Street, we actually voted that down, and then we were advised to reopen that, and then we didn't have any. We changed our vote. So I'm of the idea. I think it's option one, to leave things as they are. To me, it's better to have something into place instead of nothing. Yes, it could be challenged in court, but that's for the courts to figure out, not for us. I did want to ask Mr. Bertram one additional question, if that's okay, for the chair.
Please do.
So for the Wilson Street property, I voted no both times because I felt it was detrimental to the neighborhood, which is in our zoning, because it would reduce the value of houses. So in your opinion, is that something that's of substance to vote it down?
I'd honestly have to look into that, whether it would work under this statute. We can certainly get you an answer on that, but off the top of my head, I don't know.
Okay, just if you can follow up, that would be great. That's
Absolutely.
our existing zoning.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
So
got it on my homework list.
so Dave, one of the things we did talk through is, might there be some, if the special permit were approved and if the overlay was approved at town meeting, then would there be some legal process by which the special permit could still move forward? And at least the initial guidance we got was that it would, the challenge is not with so much with the special permit, it's with the zoning overlay. So the risk is not so much with regards to any particular project that might be impacted by the zoning overlay. The risk would be that the entire overlay could be overturned through the courts. Is that fair, Brian?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a risk.
Yeah, well, right now we only have special permit at our disposal, and we're looking obviously at the second option. And just a follow-up comment, I would like to see what the town feels about this, whether they support it or not. If we don't put this up for vote, we don't know how the town feels. And and something else that we haven't really done, and we probably should have a long time ago, is meet with the selectmen, a cooperative meeting to find out, really talk this through, because we talk this through in our board, we make a decision, and then we hear advice, differently from a different board that, basically is the final answer. So I don't know. That's just kind of throwing out some options, but I still feel like I would want to keep this on the on the town meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Jane?
Sure. So a couple things worry me here. One is that town council admitted earlier that they really didn't look, or the attorney general won't even look at the map. And that really surprises me, because in my opinion, the map along 495, that's just a farce, because the town doesn't even own that property. It belongs to the state. And the state has already often said that they won't build solar panels on that strip. So it's kind of, but anyway, it comes down to private property rights versus the rights of the abutting neighbors and landowners. And, their considerations for their property values and the viewscapes and things like that. So how do we get through this? And I think that a couple of people have already said that. I think what's missing in our planning board conversation is specifics. We haven't really addressed how is this zoning bylaw going to affect future growth. If we lock out all solar panels throughout the whole town, basically, because you're talking about 90% of the town, what does that leave it left? It's 90% that's going to go out to developers. And that goes to, growth. Growth is number one topic that we're talking about, how to control that. So if we rule out all of this stuff with the solar panel, where are we? We're left with more infrastructure, more police, more fire, more schools, more teachers, more taxes in town. So what is the answer, and how can we come up with some concrete language that actually addresses this? And this is where I'm struggling. So, I think we, and I go along with Gary, we kick it back to the number 3 and kick it back to the ZAC to actually ask them to look over some language that would speak to things like enhancing the buffer zones so that people in the neighborhoods actually can't see, or it's really hard to see these solar lit overlay districts, that we specifically speak to how can we control ridge lines and slopes. Do we talk about putting in an 8% gradual incline restriction? Do we have them take away some of the property so that they can plant shrubberies and trees between their layers of solar paneling, so that we can have this revenue of tax income that's good for the private property owners, that's good for the town, without going into the potential of letting it out there just to develop,
Jane,
more things like that. Do we talk about dark
Jane.
skies and lighting issues and things
Hey,
like
Jane.
that? There are very specific
Jane.
things that we can get into.
Jane, sorry, I just want to be cognizant of time, but it sounds like you're supportive of option 3 of withdrawing, and I just want to make sure that other people have a chance to speak as well. But I think we get the
Okay, so
the rationale
no,
behind your
yeah,
thought. So thank
I'm
you.
in affection of kicking it back to Zach with some very specific
Okay.
direction for them. I'm not just talking because I'm talking, Gary. I would like Zach to hear some specific stuff of what I, as a planning board member, would like to see them tackle.
Yep.
It's not easy, but
Yep. Okay. Mary.
Yes. So I definitely struggle with this whole issue. First of all, just dealing with the current special permit that we are discussing, and the fact that it is that particular property is not on the zoning map. I personally feel that this property doesn't belong on the zoning overlay for solar. So I would not want to see it on the zoning overlay for solar if there were no special permit being discussed. So, if this were not going on right now, I don't think this property would be appropriate on the zoning overlay for solar. However, Seaborn Solar has been discussing this with us in good faith for a period of time, and I do feel that it's appropriate to continue that and not have a zoning change take it out from under them. On the issue of whether or not the whole issue goes back to Zach, and you're right, it would probably only be a 6-month difference in time in terms of going before the town. However, the deadline for Zach to discuss this and get it on to the next town meeting would be January. We have not had a Zach meeting in several months because of COVID, and we've been advised not to hold any remote meetings. So I doubt that it would end up on a 2021 town meeting, just from a practical standpoint. I doubt that there would be time to go into as many of the details as has been suggested. I certainly think that Zach could do more with this. I don't think that means it has to come off this town meeting agenda warrant. I'm sorry. I think that additional work can be done, as we had earlier discussed during the discussions, the planning board discussions about this article, is that Zach can further define specific requirements for parcels to be added to the overlay and things like that. And lastly, I would like to say that just as a member of Zach, it has been very frustrating because we have open meetings and we get very little input from the public. And then it comes to planning board and we get a lot of input from the public. But then, as Dave pointed out, we go to town, it may be a totally different story because the people who come to meetings to give us input are different than the general opinion of the town, or the percentage. So it's very frustrating. And we did get advice from town council during the ZAC process in the discussion of this. But again, it's kind of slightly different interpretation now. And I'd like to make sure that we get more attention at the ZAC stage from the professional input that we ask for.
So Mary, if I can just clarify one thing, and I have a question for you, but for John, or maybe for Brian for that matter, is there an option for Zach to meet virtually, or is that in that non-essential category? So there's no option for them to meet remotely.
So I was actually just going to send Mary a message after this to say maybe we should start the ZAC meetings up. So at the beginning of all this, when it was all uncertain, the guidance from the town was to only hold the necessary meetings. And as things have unfolded, we haven't gotten revised guidance saying now you can hold all the meetings, but I have seen a lot of boards start to meet again, and it doesn't look like we're going to stop the virtual meeting anytime soon. So it's kind of like, if you can do it, might as well just get started, and no one's really telling you to stop anymore. So Zach could certainly start meeting again, and they can meet virtually. So I don't think that is something that we necessarily need to be concerned
So
about.
Mary, given that option 1 being continue as it is now, and option 2 being withdraw and send it back to Zach, which of those is your preference?
I think we should continue and take it to town meeting, and then allow Zach to continue to work on other aspects of additions to the solar overlay map and the criteria for it. Thank you.
Sundar, your thoughts?
I'll be honest, I'm very new to this. My only perspective on this at this point, Gary, is given that the applicant has worked with the planning board in good faith with certain set of assumptions, it does seem prudent for us to continue as is. But my perspective doesn't come out of, this is just my second meeting here. So just in the sense of fairness to the process and to the applicant is where I'm coming from, not from any deep knowledge of the past and the zoning laws as well. So if I was to vote, I would say definitely continue as it stands right now. But I'm not even sure I have a vote in the process, because I think John had said that I probably cannot participate in any vote in this.
So Gary, can I clarify?
Yes, please do,
I
John.
think there's a misunderstanding here. So you can vote on either withdrawing or maintaining the status of the town meeting article. That's not something you can't vote on the special permit because you haven't been present for the previous hearings.
I get.
So, and continuing the process. So we're not talking about the special permit right now. We're talking about the town meeting article. So continuing, quote unquote, continuing would mean leaving it on the town meeting warrant for the town to vote.
Okay.
And then removing it would be taking it off of the warrant so that it could get sent back to Zach and potentially revised, or reopening the hearing, which from what Brian has said may seem a little difficult, since we'd have to have kind of a meeting within a meeting.
I would still stand by what I said. I would probably continue with keeping that in the warrant of the town meeting.
Okay. Muriel?
Yeah, so I find myself in the unenviable position of being in a little bit of disagreement with you, Gary, which hardly ever happens. But I really appreciate the thoughtful comments that have happened here. I want to make sure I say a couple of things. This is a really gnarly set of questions. It's one question, but it's a real challenge. And the reason it didn't get done before was because it's so challenging, and the folks that looked at it before just put some guidance in with the special permitting to put it in zoning, and put off the question about where these commercial uses should be. And I think that it's important to remember that zoning is about the ways it is appropriate to use land. It doesn't matter who owns it. It doesn't matter if it's the state. It doesn't matter if it's Muriel. It doesn't matter if it's somebody else. Zoning is about what is appropriate to use a particular piece of land for. And zoning is always used to try and moderate where uses would be most attractive. And a commercial use within a residential or directly abutting a residential area just isn't what any of us would choose. I am sorry to know that we're tangling up an applicant in this question too. I think that it's important for us to be really thoughtful about how we proceed with that. I think it's going to be incumbent upon us if we do take it to town meeting, and I hope that we do. I think it's going to be necessary for us to be very transparent, very honest, so the voters know what all the implications are. I think back to the heritage question we had a year ago. That was just, there was no easy answer, but there was an answer we had to find. I do think that Zach has done a very credible job, and I think the planning board has done a very credible job, and I think that the public has had an opportunity to weigh in. And I think that the public is very interested in some controls on commercial uses within or directly abutting residential uses. And I don't think anybody appreciated that it would happen that way. And I think a lot of people think of solar as being very attractive. I do as well. And I think that they think about it as being a quiet, good neighbor, but it does change the character of neighborhoods. We have seen it, and we haven't been able to solve that puzzle and make sure that neighborhoods are protected. And I think that we really do want to, and I know the state is looking at this too, we really do want to have the discussion and disincentivize clear cutting trees, which are their own, certainly their own benefit, environmental benefit, to put up a commercial use. I frankly think it's time to ask the towns, that the town meeting voters, to help us to weigh in on this and help us decide, fully understanding all the complicating factors. I also think, and I'm not a lawyer, I operate without the benefit of a degree, but I also think that overcoming a town meeting vote, if the town is behind this substantively, and a 2/3 vote is pretty substantive, I think that is an indicator to developers where we want them to pursue putting solar, and it's our right to do that. So I'm in favor of pressing ahead and asking the voters.
Okay. Thanks, Muriel. And appreciate your thoughtfulness there. And last, we haven't heard from Deb yet. Deb, do you have any additional thoughts that we haven't already been shared, or that you would like to share?
Yes, I do. And I appreciate, I'm somewhere, I believe, between Mary and Muriel. I am so appreciative of the recent applicant and the thoroughness that they've done their job, and their considerations for the neighbors. So as far as the current process, I think we should proceed with an open mind, keep reaching for the right answer there. For the secondary complexity, I would hope to allow the process to continue, because I do think that our environment is affected by these developments that are put on these tracts of land, by the different animals that need the water, that need the resources that we're taking up. And so it's not just, it is the neighborhoods, it is the value of the land, to the extent that we could prove that. But I'd also like to find out if town council could take another look at maybe looking at what properties are available, to reevaluate the qualities of the properties. I don't agree with Jane that the Center State middle section is bogus. I think there is some reality and there is some traction to towns using the highways as solar locations, because some of those tracks tend to be ugly and so we know that, is it Southborough? Southborough has it. So I think there is some traction to that. But I do think town council, it'd be great if town council could help us, guide us. So my opinion would be to allow the process to continue, but get some advice from town council as to maybe looking at the map again and seeing what kinds of lands we can open up for all fairness to the applicants.
Okay. Thanks, Deb. So,
Okay, can I just make one quick follow-up comment since I went first?
if it's quick, yes, but we've got, I do want to move on to the other agenda items.
Yeah, I think it's important. So I kind of look at this as like a highway next to your house. We know we need it, but nobody wants it next to their house. And it basically it could happen to anybody in this town. And that's what we've seen for those of us that have been to a bunch of solar meetings. I have not seen one abutter stand up for getting this put in place. It's always, kind of not my backyard. All of a sudden their values go down. And we've seen that. So that's why I really want to give a chance to the town to hear what they want, because maybe they do want.
So Dave, I'm just going to cut you off because I do want to move on, and I think we've got a reasonable consensus among the board that,
Okay.
of the 7 of us, 5 have a preference to continue to allow it to continue to town meeting.
Yep, I'm fine with that.
I do think it's and my ask to Mary and to Zach, assuming they can meet, is that they do schedule a meeting. They do spend some additional time talking about this and outlining some additional considerations. And if we can do that prior to town meeting, at least to incorporate that into our discussion, I think that would be really helpful. But in general, I mean, like I said, of the 7 of us, 5 have a preference to continue, and I'm, I think that I appreciate everybody sharing their perspectives, and I think that's the right way for us to move forward as a board.
So, Gary,
Brian or John, any closing thoughts before we move on?
I don't have anything in closing. I have one homework assignment, which I'll follow up on for Dave,
Okay.
but other than that, I'm good.
Okay.
John, did you want to comment? Because I have a comment.
No comment.
So Gary, through not related to our vote here, but I did want to make possibly a second homework assignment for Richard Bertram, because it's related, but it's not related, if you know what I mean. So we've heard that the state is trying to get legislation passed for different types of SRAC credits for brown areas versus green areas. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that at all, Brian.
Dave, I'm sorry. I don't think that's necessarily relevant for town council. I mean, that's asking him to comment on legislation that hasn't occurred yet.
Well, that's my, if you let me finish, that's my question is, has it occurred or has it not occurred?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I mean, if a request is made for legal counsel to look into that, we certainly can.
So
Gary, not to
so hang on, Dave. So
Gary,
okay.
Just let me state my point, please. Not to be argumentative, but you were the one that spoke in a meeting and said that it had already passed. Or I'm not sure if it was privately in a meeting, but I'm confused whether this legislature is, and I think it's very appropriate for what we're talking about. So please.
So my understanding is that there are additional incentives for developing brownfield sites as opposed to greenfield. I think the debate is that those differences are not enough. So Dave, I'll actually I'll give you a homework assignment if you're willing, because I do think someone that might be worth reaching out to get better perspective on this is Carolyn Dykema. She is always a great resource for us, and I know that she's been very, very close. So I'm wondering if you would be willing to reach out to her on behalf of the board and understand where things lie with regards to state
I personally don't feel comfortable reaching out to her, but I think you're not being receptive here at all, if I may, because our town council should be able to guide us what the state regulations are. And you said that it already passed, but when did it pass? I'm not aware of that. I think we should be able to ask town council for legal information. I mean, you and I seem to have a disagreement on that, so I would maybe ask the previous chairman of what her thoughts are on that, if you're okay with it.
I'm not okay with it, Dave. I've provided you the information that I had from Carolyn Dykema, who is in our state legislature. You're asking town council to, and if it's one thing to go back and research and understand what the current incentive structures are, I'm not even really sure that's a legal question. So, I mean, I don't think that's relevant to this discussion. I think that's a legislative question, not a legal question if you're talking about incentives. So we're going to move on because we're already almost an hour in. So I'm happy to talk about it with you. I think I'm allowed to talk about it with you offline with regards to the meeting format here, but we're going to move on. Okay. Attorney Bertram, I appreciate you calling in and appreciate your input. And I think we're moving on to the next topic. So thank you.
I'm going to sign off. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it was a pleasure meeting all of you.
All right.
Good night.
So Dave, fortunately enough, the next administrative item is one that you'd requested, Legacy Farms South trees. So maybe if you would just want to quickly go through why you wanted that as a discussion item for the board.
Sure, thank you. So I was driving down Clinton Street a while back, and I noticed that driving by Legacy Farms South, which I believe these two trees are on that property, there were two big, huge dead trees and no new trees planted along Clinton Street. So I wanted to bring this up just to see if it was an option for us to approach the developer and see if those trees could be replaced.
I think I know the answer to that question through the chair.
Sure, Jane, go ahead.
Trees, I believe, are on town property. It's not part of Legacy Farms development. It's part of the town's responsibility.
Part of the right of way, Jane?
Yes.
Okay. So maybe, John, would you be able to confirm if those trees are in the right of way or if they are on the Legacy Farms overlay?
So I think, Dave, thanks for bringing this forward, if I can, Mr. Chair. We should probably ask the tree warden to look at those because they, I'm not an arborist, but they look pretty dead.
Yeah.
Oh, they're dead. They're only interested in trees that could interfere with the power lines. And if you notice, the power lines,
Yeah.
the other side of the street.
I agree with you, Muriel. I think we've got to probably confirm whose property they're on before we
Yeah, I
ask
agree.
anyone to take action. And I think once we confirm the answer to that, then we can either ask the tree warden to take a look. But I mean, I know there's certainly other circumstances where requests have been made and granted to remove trees, whether it be for sight lines or for other sort of safety purposes. So I think that there's very likely a pathway forward here. I just want to confirm whose property they're on before we discuss any further action.
Yeah, totally makes sense.
Does that
All right,
seem reasonable,
thank you,
Dave?
guys. Thank you, guys.
Okay. Thanks for bringing it up. And I ride my bike past those all the time, and I've often often thought the same thing. So board appointments, we've got a couple of board appointments to vote on. John, do you want to take us quickly through these?
Sure. So the planning board appoints members of the design review board and zoning advisory committee. And the zoning advisory committee, Mary, I need to reach out to the board members because that gets appointed every year, I believe. Or sorry, no, design review board gets appointed every year. Zach has certain terms, and the terms for a lot of the members are actually up, so they need to reapply. But Madhu Chandrasekhar and Rhea McNamara have reapplied. John Coutinho reapplied, but his term doesn't end until next year, so we don't need to reappoint him. And then Rhea McNamara has reapplied for the design review board, and we need to get the board members to reapply for that as well.
So, John, just a thought here, and two potential pathways forward. One is we could vote on the folks that have reapplied thus far, but I'm wondering if maybe it's worth reaching out to all the members that need to reapply, and also buying a little bit more time to see if there are other people that are interested in applying, and then we can evaluate each of the boards in one complete discussion. Would that make sense to you, or do you have a alternative as to how we move forward
It
here?
may. The concern that I have is if board members that are currently sitting on the board don't want to get reappointed, the timeline of that, if we're waiting for the last person to say that they're interested, could get stretched out past the point where their term technically expires, which is August 31st. So, we have one more meeting before the terms expire to have these boards appointed. And I don't see everyone reapplying by the 10th.
Okay.
Do you know who?
But then our only other option would be to vote on Madhu and Rhea now. And I guess what I don't know is I don't know if there are other applicants that may come forward to apply.
That's true. The ability to apply for these boards is open at any time. You can submit an application if you're interested, and we receive it. And then when an opening happens, or when this time comes, if you're interested, you are considered for that seat. It's not like the planning board vacancy where it gets noticed and then you have a certain amount of time to apply. These are kind of not a rolling basis because they're appointed once a year, but the application process is a rolling basis.
Okay. So would you recommend then that we vote on the folks that have applied thus far?
Yes.
Okay.
And
Muriel.
I just want to know who is up. And can we just talk about zoning advisory first?
Yeah, let's do that. So John, can you confirm who's up
Yep, I'm
for reappointment?
Pulling the
Zach?
document up right now. All right, so Mary is up. Ted Barker Hook, Rhea McNamara, Ron Foisey, Elise Barrett Mihajlowski, Madhu Chandrasekhar, and Carol DeVoth. So basically, John Catino, Sundar, looks like those two are the only ones that are still sitting on the board.
Muriel, any further thoughts?
No, do we send, just because it's been so, so disjointed because of the COVID health emergency, does the board feel comfortable? I would like to send a reminder notice to all the folks that are up, thanking them for their service and inquiring about whether or not they'd like to continue so that we can finish appointments at our next meeting in August, or know where the vacancies are if people are not interested in serving.
Yeah, I agree, Muriel. I think that makes sense. And if we can follow up with them, we do have one more meeting before the end of August. And it just feels a little bit premature given that so many people haven't reapplied yet.
Normally we give them reminders as part of the ZAC process, and since we haven't been meeting.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was going to send an email out this week to,
Okay.
to all the board members to reply.
Okay.
So
Technically, Ron is a representative of the chamber, so the chamber should be recommending an appointment to us. Yeah.
Okay.
So just
So-
for myself, I want to say thank you to everybody who has been serving. I know that it's a lot of work, and in some ways it's a benefit and it's a plus and a minus. You don't necessarily get a lot of notice, and then sometimes when like we were just discussing, sometimes it gets challenging when you've worked really hard on something and then the public does take notice. But I think that this process, this year-round process, has been really effective. I know COVID has interrupted everything. Now, just for myself as a recent planning board chair, but as a resident too, I want to thank everybody who's been serving, because we are very well served by the folks on the Zoning Advisory Committee. And I'm hoping that a lot of people will want to continue serving, because I think they've been doing good work.
Okay. Thank you, Marilyn. I wholeheartedly agree with you. So I'm going to recommend that we wait on voting until our August 10th meeting for the Zoning Advisory Committee and the Design Review Board. And that we, that John, if you can send a thank you / reminder that they need to reapply, I think that'll just help us keep this a little bit cleaner and more straightforward.
Is the Design Review Board the same deadline?
Essentially, yeah.
Very close. John said essentially. I don't know if you heard that.
Essentially the same? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, all of the boards generally expire at the end of August.
Okay. Any objections to holding off on the votes until August 10th?
No.
Okay. And then one last, just on the other board appointments. So these are liaisons from the planning board. We have a couple of those. We have CPC, which I serve as the liaison. We have the open space, which Jane serves as, and then we have the, and Dave is on the TCMC. So I guess my question for Jane and Dave is, are you willing to continue in that capacity as the liaison for your respective committees?
Yes, I'm happy to do so.
Yes, also.
So, John, do we need to vote on these other board appointments? And since those are not changing, I would be comfortable moving forward with those.
No, we don't have to vote on those because there's no
they don't
reappointment
expire.
needed. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Got it. Okay. And then the last administrative item, I know there's a lot of people waiting to get to Franklin Road, but we have a Form K lot release. So, John, do you just want to quickly summarize this Form K lot release for
Sure.
lot 45 Forest Side?
Yeah, so this was a subdivision that was approved years and years ago, and we got an email from somebody who's trying to buy that lot, and they apparently can't find the Form K to show that it was released, and they need it. So we just need to sign a new one so they can have an original. It's already been released. Planning board has already voted to release it. They just don't have a record of it. It never got recorded at the registry, so now they need a record of it.
Any
I will
questions?
make a
or-
motion to sign a new Form K under those circumstances.
Second.
All right, any discussion? If not, then we'll move to roll call vote. Gary Trendle, yes. Jane Moran,
Jane Moran, yes.
Dave Paul,
Dave Paul, yes.
Muriel Kramer,
Muriel Kramer, yes.
and Mary Larson Marlowe,
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Sundar Savarman,
Sundar Sivaraman, yes.
and Deb Feinberg.
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Okay.
So through the chair, just so I
yes.
can jump in. I will be in the office on Thursday. So if you want to come by and sign it, I will be there. You can just email me or call me.
Okay, and we need how many signatures?
Leave 5.
Fiver. Okay.
I just want to let you know that I am puppy sitting in Somerville, so I am out for Thursday. So it's better if other people are able to sign. And Deb can't sign.
Okay.
Through the chair, just a process question. John, how do you want us to approach you? Do we go to the front door and then call you? And do you come then?
Yeah,
down?
or if you are on your way, just say, hey, I'm leaving. And then I'll just meet you at a certain time at the front door.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, John. And so it looks like for the rest of the 5 of us, if there is an opportunity to get over Thursday, that would be much appreciated. So
Between what time and what time? Sorry, I missed that.
I'm usually there between 9 and 4.
Okay, got it.
And if you can't make it on Thursday, I can leave it with somebody else in the department, or I can leave it on the table in the back. We can find a way to get it signed.
Should not be a problem. I'm working from home, so I can come.
okay. All right, so let's go ahead and move to Franklin Road Solar Special Permit. And so if we want to unmute Mr. Rodriguez, Mr. Fasandola, who else do we have here?
Mike.
And Mike, thank you. And Mike, I apologize, I don't remember your last name.
Muted.
I think Mike is muted.
No,
All right.
Yes, it's Mike Kenefick. I'm here. I work with Adam Costa, but he was busy tonight. He had another hearing, so I'm sitting in for Adam tonight.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. And I apologize that I didn't know your last name. So let's go ahead and start with updates. And I know that there were a couple of follow-up items that the planning board had requested, and there was also some emails back and forth that I think spoke to those. But for the benefit of the public, for people that don't have the meeting packet in front of them, could somebody from Seaboard just walk us through those updates?
I can't. Well, to start off, I guess I wanted to address, I think, 4 different issues that were included in the agenda for tonight that the planner had sent to us. The first being the lot coverage issue. I don't know if you remember this, but this has actually been resolved. This went back and forth with Beta back in April, and they sent a letter out, I think it was dated April 17th, 2020, agreeing with us that lot coverage doesn't actually apply here. Your solar bylaws don't incorporate lot coverage requirements, therefore they don't apply. So that issue, I think, was kind of hanging out there, but it was resolved in April, but it's still in, or what's still included in tonight's materials. So I just wanted to make sure we clarified that. There was also an issue with the conservation restriction, where that was mentioned. We've already agreed that we would donate open space to a third party for conservation. This was, I think, a couple of months ago that we've indicated that we'll do that. As far as the parking issue, indicated in the past that Seaboard was going to or they were going to have halt the land trust, actually figure out where they wanted the parking and kind of come up with an idea where they thought it would best benefit them and the public, and that Seaboard would end up reimbursing them for the cost of the installation of the parking lot. There's also another issue with lighting. There's not going to be any lighting at the site. There were some also some photos that were submitted to the board, I think, a few days ago. My client, he had taken pictures at night to address whether or not there was any glow from the moon. These are anti-glare panels. There's just no glare at night or during the day. And I think we also had produced some materials from Mass CEC and Mass DEP that indicate that glare is almost a non-existent issue with solar arrays. So those are the four issues I wanted to kind of address in the tonight's materials. The other I kind of just wanted to address because some of the board members had just previously tonight had mentioned, their concern for property values. And that's absolutely a valid concern and one of the very purposes of why you serve on this board. So Seaboard wants to be a good neighbor. Throughout the course of these negotiations, I think Mr. Rodriguez has been very accommodating. He's provided perspective drawings. They've actually agreed to more screening than they've ever agreed to in any other project that we've been involved in. They agreed to install agriculture and fencing in some areas rather than chain link. There was some neighbors that had concern about fencing near their property, and we have agreed already to install wood fencing there, which is something that the neighbors wanted over chain link or the agricultural. So our goal has always been to minimize the impact of the neighboring area. We want to be a good neighbor. We want to screen this. We want the neighbors to be happy about this. Seaboard wants to go on and continue to do good business. If they leave anybody upset in any community, that reputation would follow them into the next. So our goal has always been, number one, to be a good neighbor, and that's what we intend to do here.
Thanks, Mike, and I appreciate the updates there. One follow-up question, and I know it was summarized in the email that's in the packet, but can you just review the fencing changes? And I really appreciate it. I think that I think that the Seaboard has gone above and beyond with fencing. I think, anyways, particularly with a wood fencing, which is a really, I think, a nice solution. But can you just explain to us where that's going and what exactly it is for the benefit of the public?
Nick might be better equipped to answer that, or Pedro.
Sure, through the chair, Nick Fassendole, Level Design Group. After conversations with the applicant's rep, Pedro Rodriguez, we discussed, as Mike detailed, changing the fencing type to something that's allowable per codes, national codes for these systems. So the general site fencing is going to be an agricultural style fencing. So it's essentially cattle fencing. It's wooden posts with a a wire mesh fencing, and so it's a more natural looking fence over your typical chain link style fencing. That's still going to have the 8-inch gap at the bottom for wildlife movement, and we're also it's also going to be 8 feet high. And the other fencing change is along the northern boundary of the property, just to the I'm going to call it the southerly side of the trail, which is between the development and Fawn Ridge Road. That whole back section is going to be a solid wood fence, an 8-foot high solid wood fence. That's to provide additional screening to the abutters. We know they had some concerns about looking onto the system. So, we feel with the 8-foot high solid fence and the plantings that we're providing in that area, it's going to be a substantial buffer, and sight lines should be absolutely mitigated, even through the winter months where there's less vegetation in the existing natural buffer, which is going to be left between the development and the residential dwellings. So that entire length, I believe it's 13 and 15 Fawn Ridge Road, along those back properties will be an 8-foot high solid fence. We're also installing that same solid fencing, or proposing that same solid fencing between the property lines of 65 and 67 Franklin Road. So as you can see, if you're familiar with the site plan, where it essentially kind of bumps out around those properties, that whole area is going to be solid fencing, 8-foot high, through that area. We're stopping the fencing at the wetland buffer lines, but that's well beyond the limits of the proposed array. So we're going to come up, go around the bend, the hard 90, and continue west and to cover the entire length of the solar array with that solid fencing.
Thanks, Nick. Do you by chance have any photos or illustrations or specs for the fencing? And again, I just want to give people a perspective as to what this might look like.
So the solid fence, sure. Let's see if I can share my screen. I can show the details that were provided on the revised site plans.
What page is that from the site plans too?
That should be, well, let me see. It would be one of the last ones. So that would be page 22 on the PDF.
Okay,
The
thank you.
bottom right-hand corner is the agricultural fencing detail, and the wooden fencing detail is on page 21, bottom left-hand section of the plan. So the wooden fence is
John, are you
essentially
able to share that on the screen for folks that are at home? Oh, you're muted, John.
Might be easier for Nick to bring it up.
Sure, I can do that.
Okay.
Let me make sure Nick can
You
do
have
it.
to enable me to share.
Yep. Yeah, you should be all set, I think.
All right. Yep. Okay. Okay, so let me zoom in. This is the detail for the solid wood fence. It's essentially a solid cedar fence, cedar posts. The posts rise up a little, a little higher than 8 feet, and then the paneling, vertical paneling, rough sawn cedar. So it's natural but weather resistant. And we're not proposing any staining or of any color or painting of the fence. We're just going to leave it natural. That's the current proposal.
Okay.
So that's that fence, and then the agricultural fence is down in this corner. So it's essentially a square pattern. Like I said, it's like a cattle fence, and line posts every 20 feet with the wooden, metal fencing affixed to those line posts. And then the gates will be, there's a detail of the gate that's going to be constructed. that the gates will have some metal rods in an X pattern for additional support as required, but that's a general idea of what the fencing gate will look like.
Thank you, Nick. That's really helpful. And again, my personal opinion, I think that looks a whole lot nicer than chain link, and I appreciate Seaboard their willingness to consider this. Any other with regards to the updates? Any other questions or comments from the planning board members?
Just, through you, Mr. Chair, I understand that there won't be lighting on the site, but there is lighting on the road that's going to stay in existence, correct?
Yeah, I can talk to that. Yeah, the lighting on the road is going to stay existing just because of the building, but it's going to be continued to be illuminated the way it is right now. No changes because of the solar system.
I just wanted to make sure that that was clear for the public, so there wouldn't be any big surprises. Does it, what, and I apologize, going back in time here, but is it typically illuminated at night or no?
The solar project or the building?
The road.
I believe that Liberty Mutual used to illuminate the road. They have like ground mounted small lights, but now that the building is vacant, we are not turning them up. So it's all dark during the night.
I do also remember that Liberty Mutual enjoyed a reputation for being really well done from a lighting perspective when they were functioning. So
yeah,
I appreciate that we're not adding any light.
Correct.
Jane, I think you had a question or comment.
Just one quick question. As far as the abutters with the fencing goes, I know I've worked with other projects where the abutters have asked for pass gates to get into access the trail system on the properties. And I'm just wondering if that fencing is anywhere near the trail and if the abutters have been offered that or if they asked for that.
I can answer that question.
Go ahead, Pedro.
So the fencing that we are proposing is replacing the chain link, so the trails are still going to be maintained open to the public. They do not need to. There's no go to. It's just going to be open.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments before we move back?
Through the chair, I just wanted to make clear, we received some letters after the memo was sent out, so they're in the online folder. I just wanted to call those out so that everyone knew that they were there. They are a letter from Ann Karnofsky and a letter from Tom Robertson.
Okay, thank you, John. And I do just want to hit on a couple of things here, and I think Seaboard has already commented on the principal planner comments with regards to lot coverage calculations. So that was unclosed previously. And then there was one other unclosed item from the principal planner's comments with regards to the type of vegetation that's included in the spec'd out Ernst solar farm seed mix. And my understanding of John's concern is that if the flowers are going to flower above 12 inches, but then the area is going to be mowed or cleared at below 12 inches, then that might defeat the purpose of the pollinator mix. And so I'm wondering if somebody from Seaboard can just at least clarify the relative height of the pollinating flowers versus the maintenance height for the maintained fields and space.
I can start. So as you know, we went before the Conservation Commission. We recently, about 4 weeks ago, received an order of conditions and they approved the pollinator mix. It's actually, I believe, shown on some of the plans that you have before you tonight on the landscape plan. One of the conditions from the Conservation Commission is that the meadow not be mowed at all unless it interferes with the function of the solar arrays. So we would hope that we wouldn't have to mow at all, but if we did, it would be limited to trimming, not just running lawnmowers over the area.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. So if we move into the outline, and again, I just want to close off on a couple of things that we still had as open. The first was on 6.1. We had left open trail access / parking, and I think that we're covered on that now. I am going to propose that we have a condition that specifies that that parking facility or that those parking spots that that Seaboard will work with HALT to install. We also had an open item on site lighting, but and again, I think that's resolved given that there's no additional lighting being added to the site. Is that, and if anybody feels otherwise, please speak up now. But I think we're closed out there. And then with regards to the outline, the next couple of topics for us, the first would be battery storage. And I don't think we've talked, I know we've talked a little bit about this, but I'm wondering if Seaboard can just quickly comment on battery storage, how they're stored. And I think what we're probably all most concerned about is twofold. Number one, that they're actually threefold, that they're safe, that they're screened, and that there's how they're mitigating risk of any type of contamination if something were to occur with those batteries.
Sure, I'll speak to that, and I'll let Pedro fill in any details that he feels are pertinent. But as you can see on the plan I have on the screen, I'll zoom into where the battery storage is going to be. It's essentially at the entry point of the array. This maintenance vehicles don't have to travel too far, and if there's any maintenance that needs to be done on the battery storage, they'll just enter the site and take care of that. We have 3 proposed batteries. The battery systems are lithium-ion batteries that are provided by the manufacturer in a sealed container. It essentially is a shipping container on steroids designed for these battery systems. They have fire suppression systems built into these systems. They're remotely monitored, and they're completely sealed. So there's no possibility of any leaking or anything of that nature. You know, the lithium-ion battery is a style battery that's in your cell phone. It's very commonly used for this application. There's just a high quantity of them. There's no lead acid batteries or anything of that nature where you have toxic chemicals in large quantities where there could be a concern. With regards to screening, this whole area.
Hey, Nick, sorry, just go back before you go to screening. Is there any fire risk with these lithium-ion batteries, given the number or size that are being stored here?
And I can answer to that question. So we don't, of course, we don't expect anything, but just to address the safety concern, all the energy storage that we are going to propose to be installing, not just in this site, they have their own fire suppression system, and they are managed by a software, so it's controlled offsite. So if there's any issue or any minor situation with the battery that is not acting the way it's supposed to, not just an emergency, it will automatically shut off. To add to that, with the manufacturer that we're working on, they have proposed and they're willing to, at no cost, to provide classes and safety preparation to the first responder of town of Hopkinton, not just for this location, not just for the battery, but just for energy storage in general. We have done it in other towns, so we can also do it here.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Deb.
So can you explain, so the fire suppression suppressant is internal in the battery and there's no leakage, then why are we providing specialty gear to our first responders?
It's not gear per se, it's training. It's a chemical fire suppression system, and the technology on these battery systems is new and it's evolving, and it's a service that the manufacturer provides to make sure that communities are they feel confident with what they would need to do if they were to respond to an incident. We've talked to the chief about this, and he's confident that the style battery we've chosen is sufficient. And another thing that goes along with these batteries is these all need to be once again reviewed and approved at the building permit stage. So the fire chief will get the full spec package, have a chance to comment and review and provide input on the type of battery storage and fire suppression system for these batteries. The electrical inspector will review these specifications at the time of building permit. So there's also an additional regulatory review period for this system at the time of building permit.
Is it possible, I'm wondering through the chair, is it possible to get some statistics on your other facilities that use these suppression systems, and if they have any kind of track record or history?
I can get something from the actual manufacturer, but just for the record, the projects where we expect this for the SMART program, so those projects are being built right now. We haven't actually installed energy storage. The energy storage have been incentivized only for the past year and a half, so those projects are not being built right now in Massachusetts. So I can definitely go back and ask, but.
Okay, so through the chair. I'm just wondering, so these haven't been used before, correct? Is that right?
Well, we haven't personally used in any of our projects, but yeah, they have been used in Massachusetts and any other states. And just also to add to that, we're going to be working with Con-Ed, which is probably the highest rate safety energy storage system, are the ones that are installed in hospitals, large factories, schools. They don't even require a safety radius, just like gas tanks or anything like that.
Okay, so just for clarification, this might be a dumb question, but so these don't make any sound?
I'm sorry?
These don't make any noise?
No, we don't make any noise. And I believe that, I don't know if it was, I can't remember if it was you or somebody else from the, so I addressed that question. We submitted the paperwork. Basically, I went back to the manufacturer and I asked if we could add the connection that you requested. And I can quote what they responded was basically they said that they do not believe it is necessary. They do not recommend it because basically they design all these equipment on.
Okay, so this was the piece of equipment that was 60 decibels?
Yeah.
I have a little recording of my emergency generator that I don't know if you can hear it. Let's see. Get it up, but it's I can't get it up. Of course, nothing works when you want it to, but it's so I just want a clarification. It is 60 decibels, not 68, because I've heard two different.
Yeah, the one that we're speaking right now is 60 decibels and at 33 feet.
So John, I don't have. I would like to send this to the board because what I did was in this video, I walked right up to it from 25 feet, and then I backed away from it up a hill over, giving it a fair chance, like over 100 feet. And I found it still quite noisy. And so there are 3 of these things emitting 60 decibels. So I'm a little concerned that the, sort of the cross use of halt using the property, and, the trails, or the piece of the trails may conflict.
And I want to
that.
Deb, just one point of clarification. Do you know how many decibels your generator produces? I just want to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples here.
Yeah, it's 64.
64.
And so for the record, the nearest residential property or residential dwelling from the proposed generators is over 300 feet through a fully wooded vegetated area, the wetland that runs. I can show you through here. So I mean that's the distance we're speaking of. So the batteries, and then there's a residence. It would be on Franklin Road. So we're over 300 feet through fully vegetated area, and this area stays vegetated essentially all year long, as it is a wetland. It doesn't dry up and become a sparsely vegetated area. It's a consistently vegetated area, as it is a vegetated wetland through here, and it's quite dense in that area, and that's the closest point. And then we're over almost 500 feet till you get to a residence over on this side of the site, and well over 1,000 feet by the time you get to any residence. Oh, sorry. Kind of lost it here for a second. Up by Fawn Ridge Road. So at its closest point, we're looking at 300 feet.
So I'm seeing, so the trails that we're trying to produce a nice environment for, and which I'm very appreciative that that you've given us the land to continue those practices. I'm still a little concerned that 3 of those things at 60 decibels is going to be more than we understand. Is there a way that we can get a recording that might be more accurate than mine?
I mean, we can do that, but to better answer that question, like the actual inverters and transformers of the solar system are going to be a little bit louder than the battery. I think they're like 62. If you're familiar with a solar project, you only hear the humming sound of the inverters when you get close to it. The same deal with the battery. You're not going to hear it from the trails. It's, as Nick said, the nearest neighbors are 300 feet away. We went back to the manufacturer. We submitted the documentation that was requested. So like noise is now an issue from the energy storage.
Yeah, I would just like a little bit of help with that. Is it possible to get a little bit more help on that?
So just a thought. I'm wondering if it would be worth including. I'm open to some help here, but do we include a condition specifically on the noise that's produced as part of the process? I think, Pedro, I think that'd be reasonably easy to test and validate, assuming there's no issue.
No, that's totally fine. Like Nick said, we have to submit extensive documentation during the building permit application. We can definitely submit whatever else the town requires at that moment.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering if there's a process with which we could find out maybe one of your projects that's a little bit ahead of ours, just to give us a heads up on as to what that volume might sound like.
So
we have
my only
directly across, and in the winter, they're going to be exposed on Franklin Avenue.
I guess my only concern there is that knowing that every site is different, and in case in point, I live probably well over a mile from the highway, and yet during different times of day and different seasons, it sounds very different. Personally, for me, I'd be more comfortable with a condition that set a maximum noise at, say, maybe it's the nearest trail or the nearest residence for that matter, than just trying to take something from a different site that has some different sound dynamics to it and apply that to this site.
To Gary, so can you explain to me though what a condition would do after the fact?
So a condition would require, before the permits are issued to start up this site, they would have to verify that the noise produced is below a certain threshold that we agree to.
With the chair?
Yeah, 1 second, Jane.
The town has a noise bylaw. Maybe John can confirm that. It may already be on record what the permissible noise level is, decimeters.
So the town does have a noise bylaw, but I don't know if it regulates
I believe it's there somewhere.
I'll take a look. And through the chair, just I want to clarify, because I was doing a little bit of research if this is necessarily relevant, but decibels are measured on a log scale. So a measurement of 70 decibels is actually 10 times louder than a measure of 60 decibels. So it's not, I was incorrect in my assumptions when I was listening to this, but hearing something like that means that it's not exactly a
No, it's not linear.
linear, yeah.
And I knew it wasn't linear, but I still have some concerns. I still have some concerns about what it overall produces, especially when you multiply it times 4.
So Deb, I mean, I guess the applicant is willing to include a condition. Is that my personal preference? I think that actually gives us more protection than just taking a recording from another site. But is that
My only concern with the condition is that we would be approving it. And what would we be doing to the applicant should we get that far down the line and it's not okay?
yeah? Well, they couldn't actually start up the
Really?
site and start producing power if they didn't meet that condition.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, we can't even like start building the project because we have to prove that whatever we're going to install has to meet that condition.
Okay. All right, then that's fine with me, Gary.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
I know that Mr. Gasser has had his hand up for a while, and I suspect this might be related to a topic other than battery storage. But since he's had his hand up, I want to make sure to give him a chance to ask his question or make his point. So if we could unmute Mr. Gasser.
Hi, Maury Gasser, 28 South Mill Street. I had a question, a clarification regarding something Mike said about the parking. He said that HALT would be reimbursed for the parking. Pedro has his hand up. Maybe he can clarify.
Yeah, can I? I think I know what you're going to answer. Can I go ahead and respond? Yeah, we're not going to reimburse. We're going to make a donation before the building permit is full for the same amount that we proposed. I think it was like over 10,000 or 11,000, something like that. So yeah, you're not getting reimbursed. You get that money in front.
Good. Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
And Maury, while you're on there, I just want to again that this will also be a condition. But is there an agreed to amount between HALT and Seaboard as to what that donation would be?
Yes, they got some estimates, and we were quoted $10,400, and to us that seemed adequate.
Okay. Thank you, Maury.
Through the chair, if I can answer the noise bylaw question. Commercial activity is regulated in a residential zone, but not in the A district, so it would not apply to this parcel.
Okay, thanks, John. Any other questions or comments from the board with regards to the battery storage?
The only question I have is, through you, Mr. Chair, is how we are going to identify the decibels that we're comfortable with at what distance?
That's a good question. Pedro's raising his hand, so.
I don't know the exact name of the equipment. I know there are apps for your phone, but there's an actual equipment that you can record the noise and how far it is in decibel. So it can definitely be recorded and proved after it's being built.
So
by professional.
You know, just one thought, Muriel. Based on what Pedro has shared with us, it sounds like we wouldn't even be able to hear anything, or at least to the human ear, from either the nearest trail or the nearest abutting property. So I'm wondering if we just write the condition as such that that the battery storage cannot be heard to, I don't know, whatever decibel the human ear can be from the nearest trail and or property, and that way we're pretty well covered that there's no noise issue.
Well, Gary, I like the way it sounds, that there's no, we can't hear it because Pedro said so. But I'm really, from what I could see, one of the tails of the trail lead down very close to where those units are. And I also see that there's the depression that is just prior to Franklin Street. When it's winter time, there's not going to be any forestation on that side. You know, there will be screening for the system, but there won't. But I'm just not sure. I'm not convinced that would not translate. So
Yeah. So
if it is possible that he finds an ASHRAE, that would be great. An ASHRAE, technical document that showed the volume, that would be wonderful.
okay. Do any of the other board members have thoughts on the noise and how we kind of ensure that the noise is not disruptive to either the users of the trails or the abutting properties?
This is Dave. I think more of the focus should be on the residential properties, because the trail, you're walking by it, you're only going to experience it for a couple seconds and you can keep moving. And the trails are so close, as Deb said, that it might be difficult to specify that.
Okay.
It's my opinion.
And that seems reasonable to me. And again, my preference would just be to include a condition that the batteries cannot be heard from any of the abutting properties. And again, that's not asking, for Seaboard's opinion on it. That's just, I don't recall what it is, but I know that the human ear can hear down to a certain decibel. And as long as the decibel reading at the properties is below that, then any abutter is not going to be able to hear it from their property.
That sounds reasonable.
Okay.
Gary, yeah.
All right. So let's, if Pedro, is that amenable to you?
Yeah, that works for us. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? And I see that a member of the public has his hand raised, but before I go to him, are there any other questions or comments specific to battery storage from the board? Okay. John, let's go ahead and unmute Mr. Robertson. And Mr. Robertson, if you can just again state your name and your address. And again, just in the interest of time, I would encourage you to, or I'm actually going to require you to keep your comments or questions to less than 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Tom Robertson. I'm at 15 Fawn Ridge Road. Can you hear me?
Yep. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, I just actually raised my hand here to talk about the noise issue, and I can be very quick on that, but I do have other more general comments that I wouldn't want to have my 3 minutes apply to. So what is the structure here? Are we going to have a general comment area, or comment time, or is this just about noise?
So we will have final public comment later on in the hearing outline. Right now, we're just talking about actually battery storage.
Okay. So my two comments on the battery storage is, first off, that as has been professed by Seaboard, that this is new and evolving technology, and lithium ion, and I can't even put my laptop into my luggage because the airlines are concerned about the dangers of the batteries, and I'm concerned that even though they have presupposed that the manufacturer is maintaining that they have everything covered, that in fact, if there is a disaster, if they do explode or and leach into the environment, that that has not been properly studied in the context of being in a very environmentally sensitive area. So that's my first comment. And my second is, as far as the noise and the decibel level, I have to agree with some of the comments from the board members that, in fact, the trail experience and maintaining those trails has been held out as a mitigating factor for the deforestation and the recreation values of this area. And to have that noise and that hum and the potential cumulative hum of multiple items would in fact is in fact relevant, and just saying that it's not a factor for the abutters is not sufficient in my mind for the mitigation rationale that this project has and the applicant has proposed. And lastly, you yourself mentioned, Gary, that during the seasons it changes, and when all this area is cleared, and this is on an incline, that noise will in fact waft right up into my property, and all of this these comments that have been made by the board is part of what I've put on public record as you thankfully included.
Okay, thanks, Tom. And just for people that might not, so lithium-ion batteries, just as an example, those are also the types of batteries that are used in our more common electric vehicles as well. So a Prius or a Tesla, all of those use a lithium-ion battery. So just to provide a little bit more context around them. Okay, I think we can move on from battery storage. The next item would be maintenance of roads and arrays. I think this is pretty straightforward. Are there any, and just I wonder if there's any questions or comments from the board with regards to maintenance of roads and arrays?
This is Mary.
Yes,
Through
Mary.
the chair. Yes, I think that the proposed conditions that I read through address this pretty well. So I think that, when we're discussing conditions, if you want me to pick out the conditions that address this, I will. But I think that it addresses it very well in terms of having a bond posted and so on, and laying out the maintenance that should be followed. So
Okay, thanks,
I think
Mary.
it's a renewable 5-year situation. So it basically goes for the lifetime. So.
Okay. The next topic, pollinator planting, and we've already talked some about that. And I think it's specified what the mix is, and per the Concom conditions, there's some additional requirements that the meadows not be mowed unless for maintenance. Again, I'll open it up. Are there questions or comments from the planning board with regards to the pollinator planting? Okay. The next topic, 6.6.24, wetlands. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure. This was an ad from somebody on the board, and I'm not sure what they were getting at, but the wetlands to include those outside the project area, but on the parcel. And so, does anybody recall specifically what that agenda item was about? Yes, Nick.
So that was on the initial beta review comments, which we closed out in early June. I don't think it ever got. We never really got to the bottom of the list to take it off the list. But I'll echo the beta review correspondence and our order of conditions from the Conservation Commission regarding all wetland issues. That also includes wetlands that have been identified to be 100 feet from the property line. So I think we satisfy all those areas.
And then the last of the detailed discussion, and again, I think this will be a pretty straightforward one, conservation restriction on open space. And it sounds like we've got agreement that the open space parcel would be deeded to Halt.
Or to a third party.
Yeah. Yep, you're right. Thank you, Mike. And I know that's in the proposed conditions. So I appreciate that clarification. So I think we're good there as well. So moving forward, section 7, additional or new comments and information. And again, for the time being, we will have more final public comment, but I'll open it up to the board. Are there other considerations or comments or information that you all think we should be aware of?
For the chair, this is Dave.
Yeah, Dave, go ahead.
Just a question about section 6.5 about the utilities. We may have asked this question already, but I'm not sure if I can remember the answer if we did. But a question about the waivers. There was no waiver for any above ground telephone poles. So just to ask the applicant, how they're getting across the gas easement without an overhead.
Yep.
telephone
Nick
pole.
or Pedro, do you want to answer that question?
Nick, you want to answer that question?
Sure, I'll jump in. So, on the we have two crossings of the gas line easement. The crossing I call it on the right-hand side or the easterly side of the site. We're going to be in making that crossing. We're going to be we've mounded that area up significantly to provide about a 5 or 6 foot separation between the top of the gas line and our finished grade. And in our discussions with the with EverSource, they're going to allow us to install the subsurface conduit in that mounding. So there's no need to span that area with overhead wires and new utility systems. So we'll be filling that area in as a requirement to provide substantial cover over that gas line, and that will allow us to install the conduit. The conduit's 2 4-inch lines and 1 2-inch line, so it's a small conduit bank. It's not going to take up a lot of room. 2 4-inch for electrical lines and 1 2-inch for communication lines for the equipment that's in the backside of the site.
Great, thank you.
Not a problem.
All right. Any other questions or comments from the board?
The only, through you, Mr. Chair, the only question I had, I appreciate the conditions that apply to any historical or culturally significant sites. It doesn't explicitly say, and maybe I missed it, that the significant sites will be marked in some way during construction so that they aren't inadvertently damaged or destroyed. Just it's the communication piece, and I know you mean it. I just wonder what the communication piece is between your plan and your construction team.
I can I answer that question?
Yes, please go ahead, Pedro.
Yeah. So to answer that question, we, as you guys know, we've been working with the tribes for a very long time. They've been in the property a couple of times, surveying the land, and if any monuments are found in the property, not just in the project area, they are going to be preserved. And before, I believe we have a condition for that, but if not, we'd like to propose it to submit a conservation plan that is going to delineate every single location of the monuments in the property, not just in the only the project area.
So,
and we want to preserve them.
So Pedro, just to clarify, there's actually, we have 2 proposed conditions. One is on behalf of the applicant, the Narragansett Tribe of Rhode Island and the Wampanoag Tribe of Aquina shall complete a survey to identify the features and any associated alignments within the areas of potential effect of any cultural historic resources. So the first one is just create that survey that identifies where they are. And then I guess there's actually 3 conditions here. The second is that the tribes or their designated representatives shall be given reasonable opportunity to be present as construction monitors during tree clearing in the areas identified. And then the third one is the final cultural and historic resources survey and protection plans shall be provided to the Hopkinton Historical Commission upon completion. So I think what Muriel is asking is that we survey them, but that they also be marked in some capacity, just as an additional precaution to make sure that they're not inadvertently damaged. Is that what you're asking, Muriel?
During construction, so not a permanent marking, but just some methodology for making sure that we don't lose the sites between the plan and the construction team.
Yeah, that's totally fine. I know we plan to do that anyway, so we're fine with that condition.
Okay, so we can modify that condition to include marking during construction.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. So from a process perspective, just so everyone's in the loop of what we'll do here is next is for us to discuss the special permit findings and the associated decision criteria. Then we will go through the conditions of approval, those things that we would implement or make a part of this approval if it does go forward. That is a reasonably lengthy process because I do need to read them all out loud. So, and it's several pages. So just to give everybody a little bit of a warning there. But that's really, really important part of this process because that's what makes all of this discussion that we've had over the past 6 months or so binding. At that point, then we'll open it up for final public comment. Then we will, assuming we have time, then we would close the public hearing and then we would vote on the special permit. So moving forward, the decision criteria is written as such. The planning board may issue such special permit. It shall determine each of the following. 1, the commercial solar photovoltaic installation conforms to the provisions of Article 210-203.d. 2, the commercial solar photovoltaic installation will not be detrimental to the neighborhood or the town. And 3, that environmental features of the site and surrounding areas are protected, and specifically surrounding areas will be protected from the proposed use by provision of adequate surface water drainage. And so I realize that there's a lot of complexity in discussing this. What I'd like to do is I think John has some comments or some guidance on how we should be looking at this decision criteria as we evaluate our findings. So, John, do you want to share that with us?
I'm not sure what you are getting at, but I'm happy to talk about it if you can point me in the right direction.
Yeah, I think specifically with regards to how we evaluate whether something is detrimental to the neighborhood of the town.
Right. Yes. Okay. So detrimental has a certain meaning in zoning, and that meaning is harmful to the health or welfare of residents, citizens, neighbors, abutters. Detrimental doesn't necessarily mean detrimental to or harmful to property values, doesn't necessarily mean harmful to views or stuff like that. It's more of the health, welfare, and well-being of residents and abutters. And I think that's something that's pretty, I want to say widely accepted in Massachusetts and elsewhere with regard to zoning. But I just want to caution the board on how to interpret detrimental versus how it actually is utilized.
Okay. Thanks, John. And I think what I'd like to do is just read through the findings really quick. We are going to have to take a vote on this, but I kind of want to just go around the board and get a sense of where people stand. And I think that might help us as we get into details on the proposed conditions. So as far as the findings go, the board would find that the proposed commercial solar photovoltaic installation, and I think I already read most of this actually, but that the proposed commercial solar photovoltaic installation will not be detrimental to the neighborhood of the town, that the environmental features of the site and surrounding areas are protected, and specifically surrounding areas will be protected from the proposed use by provisions of adequate surface water drainage. Additionally, the board finds that the granting of the special permit satisfies the requirements of section 210-223.g, that all applicable criteria and standards set forth in this chapter have been satisfied, and that the granting of the special permit will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of this chapter. Again, I think this is, for me personally, this, I think we all agree that these commercial solar proposals are tough ones to review, and I think that's evident just based on the number of participants and the discussion that we've had. I'll just in my willingness to go first, which I'm not necessarily crazy about here, I'll just share my general perspective here with regards to each of those decision criteria. I personally do think that the proposal conforms to the provisions of the article, and that's based on a couple of things. 1, there are no waiver requests. 2, I think that the applicant has been very accommodating to all of the additional requests that we've made. With regards to detrimental to the neighborhood of the town, this is again a really hard one. At the end of the day, I think that they are preserving the primary uses that the town and the abutters have for this land. They are offering to donate a substantial portion to HALT, which ensures that it can continue to be used. And I think that they've answered our questions with regards to health and safety to the reasonable extent that we've asked them to do so. And as far as environmental features of the site and surrounding areas that are protected, I think that they've also effectively demonstrated their ability to do that. So that's just my personal take. And again, I realize that people on the board may have a very different opinion, but I do want to take this as an opportunity to work around the table and get a sense for where people are at. So just going to go next on the list, but Dave, do you want to share your perspective, thoughts,
Certainly.
comments with regards to the proposed findings?
Certainly. Obviously, I'm not a big fan of clear cutting, but you know that these guys have done everything right. As Gary's point, there's no waivers. So the fact that you know, in previous zoning, previous solar commercial farms, I voted them down because there have been waivers for such things as above ground utilities, but there's no waivers. And thanks to John for clarifying the definition of detrimental. So that's pretty clear now. So I'll support the approval of this process.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Muriel, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair. These are complicated questions because we're all struggling with the commercial use within residential areas and so forth. But I don't know that I can add anything. I agree that with our current zoning, the applicant has certainly met the guidelines, and I would say, you know, really worked very hard to do the essential work that I think the planning board is called to do, which is to balance the competing needs of the neighbors and the property owner. And I really, I sincerely, personally appreciate the conservation restriction. I think that that is a huge benefit to the town, and the parking for the trails. I sincerely appreciate the level of effort for screening. This is a challenge we're going to continue to face. But I think this applicant has worked very hard to screen in an attractive and appropriate way. And I am personally very gratified that as much work as needs to be done to protect the cultural and historically significant sites from our neighbors, our Native American neighbors, is really substantially terrific. And I appreciate that that has happened.
Thanks, Muriel. Sundar, I know that you can't vote, but I do think that you can still offer any comments or perspective if you have any to make.
Sure, Gary. I mean, my limited perspective is that quite a lot of conditions that this body has put together, including such things as defining what kind of trees to plant, how many trees to plant, the conservation efforts, the donation to HALT, and making sure the parking lot is built. All of those things went a long way in me appreciating not just the process, but the applicants agreeing to all these conditions. So it left, I was left with a positive sense. But again, as I said, my perspective is limited to just these two meetings. I wasn't involved in that previously. But overall, I walk away with a very positive view of the applicant agreeing to a lot of the things that are near and dear, not just to this body, but to the entire town.
Okay, thank you. Jane?
Sure. So without wasting time, I wholeheartedly agree with all of my colleagues' previous voice thoughts that you've already recommended and applauded. I just want to point out a few things. I think that the pollinators seed is a great idea, and I'm not sure I've seen that before. Specifically, I want to just point out that you and HALT reached out and worked together. I don't know if I've seen that before, but I think that's a great plus for the town. And that saves us a lot of a lot of steps in between. So I really want to applaud both HALT and the developer for doing that. And the screening also, they went above and beyond. And I really think that that's going to give us a path forward when we hopefully work with some of the language going forward with future zoning language, because there's a lot of screening of the various plantings and multiple choices and fencing. There's a lot of stuff that we can do. And also one more thing, working with Paul on the trails, that they really went above and beyond. We asked them to go back to the drawing board and come up with some continuity and contiguity for the trail system. I really want to applaud them for doing that and working with the parking lot system. That was awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. Mary, it looks like you're on mute.
Somebody unmute.
Okay.
There you go.
I'm good. Okay, because I have to acknowledge the unmute. That's the two-step process. Okay, so I think it is easy to initially look at a plan and say, what are we losing in terms of the forested land and the trails and the open space? But I think that that's a false comparison in my mind, and that I have to remind myself of that. That is, this is not public land. This is private land, and it has been used very, through the goodwill of the previous owners. It has been used by the public for a long, long time, and it is great. It's beautiful. It's beautiful land. But it is private land. The town did not go ahead and purchase that land in order to keep it all open space. Therefore, we just need to, as a planning board, go through the process and make sure that the plan that is proposed for building on this land meets our bylaws and meets the state laws and so on. And it has met those. So the important thing is that the property owner utilizing their land to create this development does not infringe upon the property rights of the abutters. And the property rights of the abutters, I believe, have been very well accommodated, and would be comparable to putting in building, apartments or whatever on that land. If building is going to be happening there, the solar farm is certainly as viable as a bunch of condos or apartments. And I think that that's just something that I've had to remind myself of along the way. It's hard to see a lot of open space be turned into something not open space. But one benefit, one of the many benefits we're getting out of this is that some of this land is being permanently turned into open space. And so it cannot be in the future developed. And that is something that we haven't had a protection on this land up to this point. So it will be an improvement from that standpoint. I think the professional staff and, advice that we've gotten from legal counsel and so on in interpreting our zoning bylaws and the statutes but I certainly do think that we can move forward with this special permit.
Thanks, Mary. And Deb?
I too feel this is a really weighty decision because I think that as much as solar, we love solar, that it has a very invasive technology on uncharted land. But I agree with all of my predecessors on that agree that they have solved the problem. And I think that our bylaws have been satisfied. And but I do think that in the future, I think Massachusetts is just not. This is just not the place for that battle. I think Massachusetts will be taking a more serious look on where lands can be decimated or trees can be ravaged in relationship to water lands and animals. But I think it's just something that we cannot address in this situation. I think Mary's right. This is private property, and they have taken every step that that they possibly could with the equipment. And the one caveat that I want to address to Pedro, if that's okay, Gary,
Please do.
is I'm very concerned of some of the letters I've received of the reputation of your company. And I just want to say that you've done a very good job at addressing the issues that were in those letters. But I just want to hold true that you will be addressing those concerns and that you'll make a better future landowner. And I guess that's that. And I agree with Muriel on our native tribes. Hopefully, those questions will be answered as they proceed very, very carefully to document where those monuments are. And I hope we'll see you back again. If you have any questions that change this process, precipitously from some of those, findings that you found. It probably won't be in our court, but to the town. Anyway, so I vote in favor of it. Not that it's
So we're not voting quite yet, Deb, but thank you. Pedro, do you want to take a moment just to respond to Deb's question or request? And I think we need to unmute you. All right.
I'm sorry, Deb. Can you please? I was listening to your speech, but can you please repeat the request that you?
I guess my request is in respect to the letters that we received from other towns. I think it was Oxford, where they stated that you weren't quite as respectful to their wishes for screening and other things that you had said you were going to do. And I just want to make sure that you've learned a lot from your lessons and working with towns. I know that people grow with various projects they do, and they become more skilled at answering those kinds of questions. So I guess that would be my question to you would be, do you feel you're at the level that you can go beyond Oxford and guarantee that we will have the responses that you have given us honored?
Yeah, I mean, I want to give you two kind of answers. One of them is, yes, I do believe I'm in the level, but you do not have to take my word. I mean, we have proposed and the town has provided several conditions to this special permit that would prevent any situation like Oxford or any other situation the town's raised in the past. Nothing like that can happen. That being said, when the solar project got approved in Oxford and the other projects, I was not the lead developer for Civil Solar at that time. I got involved when those problems were in the middle of it, and I was asked to fix them. And we addressed them. And also wanted to know that those sites are not finished. We're not interconnected. We're fixing those issues. We're not going around the town to not meet the conditions. So I hope this answers your question.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Pedro. So, John, just from a process perspective, I know that, I guess I'm just wondering if you have guidance on whether we should go through the conditions before voting on the findings. And again, this would all be before the vote on the permits themselves, but I just am wondering if you have any guidance on the best order to do that, given that there are a lot of conditions to go through.
I don't think it would be a bad idea to go through the conditions, and then the findings and the conditions can actually be, you can pair them together and vote on them at once if you'd like. That's definitely possible.
Okay.
But I think it would definitely be helpful to go through the conditions to have everyone be on the same page in order to make the findings and then make the vote on the conditions.
Okay. And just to clarify, we don't need to vote on the conditions independently, do we?
No, you can vote on, so when you approve or deny, well, I guess you wouldn't deny an application with conditions, but if you were to approve with conditions, you would approve the application with the conditions and the findings that were previously read.
Yes. Got it. Okay. So, and I just was hoping to avoid a roll call vote on every one of the conditions.
Yeah,
so
you don't have to vote on each individual condition.
Okay. So I'm going to quickly go through these. I'm going to kind of take them in chunks. I think that there are some that will require a little bit more discussion. Some that we can get through pretty quickly. And I know that John has also recently updated these from the last meeting and incorporated both the changes that we've requested as well as some of the things that we've learned or added from previous solar projects. So the following are conditions that the board may want to include in any approval issued for the project. Number one, a town clerk certified version of the special permit shall be recorded at the Middlesex County Registry of Deeds prior to the issuance of a building permit for the work that is subject to this decision. Two, the Director of Municipal Inspections shall inspect projects under construction for compliance with the approved special permit decision. This includes driveway, roadway, and infrastructure construction shown in the plan. If the Director of Municipal Inspections determines at any time before or during construction that a registered professional engineer or other such outside professional is required to assist with the inspections of the stormwater management system or any other component of the special permit, the applicant shall be responsible for the cost of those inspections. Three, the solar facility shall be constructed in conformance with the approved plan, the stormwater management permit, and the order of conditions issued by the Conservation Commission. Said order to be enforced by Hopkinton Conservation Commission. Four, all construction activities shall adhere to applicable local, state, and federal laws and regulations regarding noise, vibration, dust, sediment, and the use of interference with or blocking of town roads. Five, the applicant shall be responsible for mitigating all construction-related impacts, including erosions, siltation, and dust control. The applicant shall maintain all portions of any public way used for construction access free of soil, mud, or debris deposited due to use by construction vehicles associated with the project, and shall regularly sweep such areas as directed by the Director of Municipal Inspections in consultation with the TPW Director. Six, the applicant shall regularly remove construction trash and debris from the site in accordance with good construction practice and the construction management plan. No tree stumps, demolition material, trash, or debris shall be burned or buried on the site. Number seven, all exterior lighting within the development project, whether shown in the approved plan or required by Mass State Building Code, shall be shielded, directed downward and not upward or outward, and shall not spill onto adjacent property. All fixed mechanical equipment on the site shall be screened from the view from the ground. Such screening shall be sufficient in the opinion of the Director of Municipal Inspections. A completed signed construction management plan shall be submitted to the planning board prior to the commencement of any site work. The applicant shall also submit a revised full site plan set, which incorporates all the modifications made during the public hearing process and any decision or any required in this decision. 10, erosion and sedimentation control measures shall be implemented during the construction period in accordance with the approved site plan and the construction management plan. If they are found to be inadequate, the applicant shall immediately correct any deficiencies. 11, the planning board shall receive a sign-off confirming that the site contractor and any major subcontractors have received the construction management plan prior to the commencement of any site work. 12, construction may occur only between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, and Saturdays between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. pursuant to Chapter 141, Article 1 of the Town of Hopkinton General Bylaws. 13, the applicant shall submit final as-built plans to the planning board prior to the issuance of certificate of occupancy. 14, a completed signed SWPPP shall be provided to the planning board prior to issuance of a building permit. 15, the applicant shall provide evidence of agreement with Eversource to perform work within the easement on site prior to issuance of a building permit. I'm going to pause there because the next one we're just going to have a slight modification to it. Any questions or comments on those conditions thus far? Okay. So 16, we get into the historic or ceremonial artifacts. So 16, on behalf of the applicant, the Narragansett Tribe of Rhode Island and the Wampanoag Tribe of Aquina, known as the tribes, shall complete a survey to identify the features and any associated alignments within the areas of potential effect of any cultural or historical resources, and determine what impact avoidance plan will be necessary in order to protect these resources. In addition, said features will be marked to protect them during construction. In areas identified as requiring protection, the engineer of the solar facility, racking systems, and associated infrastructure shall be designed to protect and preserve the integrity of the identified cultural and/or historic resources. A final engineering plan shall be provided to the planning board and to the tribes at least 7 days prior to the applicant's filing for a building permit for the solar facility. That one might need a little wordsmithing. I just kind of ad-libbed the marking piece there, but I think that hopefully we all are aligned on the intent of it. 17, the tribes or their designated representatives shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be present as construction monitors during tree clearing in the areas of identified cultural or historic resources where such clearings is to be allowed by hand, and for the installation of racking systems and associated infrastructure to determine compliance and to identify any petroglyphs, remains, or new cultural or historic resources to be preserved and protected after the land is cleared. The applicant shall notify the planning board if, after given a reasonable opportunity to be present, the tribes will not be present as construction monitors. 18, the final cultural and historic resources survey and protection plan shall be provided to the Hopkinton Historic Commission upon completion. Any questions or clarifications on those conditions?
Yeah, through the chair, this is Dave. Just a question would be, disassemble it, the bond there, they'll come back to us with a comment on that, right? Or,
Yes, we've got another condition specifically for that.
oh, okay, sorry.
Okay. 19, prior to the commencement of construction, the applicant shall submit a detailed estimate of the cost of removal of the installation and to complete all the obligations contained in condition 21 for review by the board's engineer. Prior to the commencement of construction, the applicant shall obtain board approval of this estimate. And this one goes along with it. In addition, in accordance with the provisions of section 210-203E, the applicant shall post a performance bond with the town to guarantee proper maintenance and removal of the solar facility in an amount equal to the estimated cost approved pursuant to condition 19. A letter of credit or other surety issued by a bank doing business in the Commonwealth pursuant to proper licensure from the Massachusetts Division of Banks shall be one acceptable form of the performance bond. The town shall be a named obligee under the bond, together with the applicant and owner, to ensure that the town may avail itself of the bond in the event that the applicant or owner fails to maintain or decommission the solar facility. No construction or preparation for construction shall commence on site until the applicant has posted the performance bond required by this condition with the town in a form acceptable to town council. So just to clarify what that means for everybody is that the cost estimate to remove the panels has to be approved by the planning board, and the applicant has to set aside a performance bond in that full amount so that the town has the reserves to remove the solar installation at some point in the future if the applicant is not able to do it themselves. 21, if the Director of Municipal Inspections determines pursuant to section 210-204 of the zoning bylaw that the commercial solar photovoltaic installation has been discontinued, the owner shall remove the installation, including all structures, equipment, security barriers, and transmission lines, and stabilize or revegetate the site as necessary to minimize erosion and sedimentation at the owner's sole expense within 3 months of receipt of notice of discontinuance. 22, the owner of the subject property and the operator of the solar facility shall have a decommissioning agreement in place for as long as the solar facility is located on the property. 23, when decommissioning and removing the solar facilities, the tribes shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be present as monitors to ensure that the historic and or cultural resources are protected during the decommissioning and removal process. So those are all of the conditions around decommissioning. Are there any questions or comments or updates from the board? Or from the applicant for that matter?
Just to clarify, Gary, I know those conditions were there. I just wanted to call those out because that's important, you know, that we get that bond for the decommissioning. So thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll move into some screening conditions. Screening of the site shall be installed immediately after the construction and installation of the access road and security fence. This was at a request, I think, from the last hearing to provide some additional protection or screening for the abutters. Prior to any construction or preparation for construction, the applicant or owner shall provide a performance guarantee. This is one of those ones that we need to determine what this amount is, but the amount of X dollars or 25% of the estimated screening costs, whichever is greater, to secure future maintenance of the required screening for up to placeholder 5 years. Such period to commence on the date on which the first plantings are installed. The performance guarantee shall be in the form of a surety bond or deposit of money in the event that the owner does not maintain screening plantings in accordance with appropriate procedures, or that screening plantings die within the 5-year performance guarantee period. The board shall have the authority to expend any portion of the performance guarantee for this purpose without consent of the applicant or owner if the applicant or owner does not take corrective action within a reasonable period of time. So a couple of questions for the board. You know, the initial amount that John had proposed was $10,000 or 25% of the estimated screening cost, whichever is greater. I want to get people's thoughts on what we should include in this condition.
Gary.
Yes, Deb.
So from what I read from the Oxford, and I don't want that to sway me too much, but they had said that the reparations for the screening was up to $300,000, and here we're only asking for $10,000. Maybe we can ask Pedro what he estimates that cost to be.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair question, Deb, and I will just clarify, it's $10,000 or 25%, whichever is greater. But
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think Pedro had originally referenced some much more substantial screening costs. So I guess I'll ask you, Pedro, what do you think is a reasonable performance guarantee with regards to screening? And you're muted. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
I was gonna speak to that one. I think the $10,000 too low based on the landscaping that we have to provide for this project. For the record, because they have mentioned it, the landscaping for Sheffield was not $300,000. Number came from. But that being said, for this project, look, honestly, the landscaping can range between $200,000. I think. I really don't know. I feel comfortable having the 25,000%, whatever is greater. We can use, instead of 10,000, we can use $50,000, which is 25% of 200,000. And in case it goes beyond that, we still have that condition of 25%.
Through the chair, I have a comment, please.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
So I'd like to phrase this just like we did for the decommissioning of the solar farm, that they come back to us with a detailed plan of how much it would cost for the landscaping, and then we approve that at that time, whether it's a percentage of that. So we talked about taking landscaping seriously. If we want to take it seriously, they should come back to us with a detailed plan and with an estimate.
Yeah. So I think Pedro, I mean, I think that's a fair point, and that screening is very important to us. So just trying to think of how we can quickly update these conditions, but I think it's effectively. Give me 1 second here.
I can find the wording on the other one.
Prior to the commencement of construction, the applicant shall submit a detailed estimate of the cost of screening per the approved plans. Prior to the commencement of construction, the applicant shall obtain board approval of this estimate. So that would be the first one, Dave. Does that make sense to you? And Pedro, is that reasonable?
That makes more sense.
And then the second one, prior to any construction or preparation for construction, the applicant or owner shall provide a performance guarantee in the amount of, I think at this point we can just say 25% of the estimated screening costs to secure future maintenance of the required screening for up to 5 years, and continue on as it's written. I don't think we need the dollar minimum if we're already also gonna approve the estimate.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Is that agreeable to the rest of the board?
That is agreeable, but I do want to discuss the duration.
Okay.
Okay. So
Go ahead, Mary.
last time we met, we did talk about 5 years not being an adequate time frame, and that certainly the screening needs to be adequate for the lifetime of the project. So there is a condition later on that talks about here, I'll find it, just a moment. Talks about decommissioning and the surety being renewed every 5 years. So that's a possibility. It's actually the next one. It's 26. So and that's for the stormwater management. So it would be a 5-year bond. I don't know if the financial instrument is the same one. John, you can probably figure that out. But it talks about renewing it every 5 years for the lifetime of the project.
So, you know, my thoughts on this, and I want to hear what other people's thoughts are. You know, at some point in any forest, or in any forest, you know, things eventually they grow, they die, things happen, and beyond a certain point of time, that's not a function of, I guess, two thoughts. Number one, that's not a function of them not being cared for, not being planted properly. It's just things happen. Any of us that have a garden or plantings, I think have probably experienced that. I also, to some degree, believe that you know, these plantings are all going to grow, and so the screening is going to improve or increase over time. So for me personally, beyond 5 years, at some point, I'm not sure that it's reasonable to hold the applicant accountable for what happens beyond 5 years. At the same time, I also get that the screening is to, you know, to protect or to screen in perpetuity. So I guess I'm on the fence on this one, but I'm curious if other people have thoughts.
I have more thoughts, but I want to give other people a chance first.
No other thoughts. It's getting late.
I agree with Mary, that because it's a facility, it's a money-making venture, and it could have effect on neighboring properties and the comfort of them in their backyards. That I think that they have an obligation, being a good neighbor, for the life of the project.
Okay, thanks. Muriel? And Muriel, you're muted. No? Nothing more to add? Oh, you,
Yes,
you
no.
do. John, can you unmute Muriel? Thanks.
Yeah, no, I just said I had tried to do it by myself, but I knew it wasn't going to work. I don't think our bylaw that we just put into place has any limit to length of time that we expect the solar to be screened fully. And I think that this is the screening is a big step and a vast compromise to try and put a commercial enterprise adjacent to or within a residential zone. So I think I agree with Mary that we mean it. We want it to be screened.
Pedro, John, can you unmute Pedro?
Just to kind of, I'm fine with that condition being the lifetime of the system. Just
okay.
Help the purpose.
That makes this a lot easier. Thank you, and Mary, thanks for speaking up on that. Okay, so John, are we good on those modified conditions?
I think so. The one question I had is, so we're not going to take out the initial 5 years mentioned because it's going to be repeated, or I can wordsmith it to make it sound correct. But did we decide on whether a surety bond is preferred or deposit of money, or are we still okay with either one?
I honestly don't know the difference between all of these things that are mentioned. So I think that has to be a professional.
Do you have a recommendation, John?
I think it's either way. I would assume the applicant would prefer a surety bond instead of just depositing cash in an account that the town holds onto. But if they want to do that, I think that would be fine as well.
Is the board comfortable with a surety bond?
The question, what do we do with the decommissioning bond?
What do you mean with that? That's a bond. Are you asking if that's a bond or deposit?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a bond.
Okay. So what your suggestion is to do the same for this, a bond?
Correct.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Sundar, yes, but you need to be unmuted.
Thank you.
All right.
So the question is a surety bond safer than an escrow or a depositing the money and with the town? I mean, how exactly? What is the safety rating of one versus the other? Is one? I mean, we all have an escrow account with our mortgage company for town taxes and all that. Is that something similar in nature, or it's? I'm just curious.
I would say they're both as safe as the other. I don't think there's any difference. I mean, one, you have the money in your account, but the other one, I think, is through a third party. So it wouldn't matter if something happened to the company.
Okay, that was exact. I didn't want to say that, but you're right. So even if something did happen to the company, we are protected as a town because some third party is holding that money. Is that what you just said, John?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
And even if the property changes hands or something like that, then that money is still accounted for.
Okay.
Okay. So I think we're good with the surety. Some language, John, around the lifetime of the project, and then the addition of the condition that the screening estimate is approved by the board prior to construction commencing.
Right. And I've got that for 25 and 26.
Yes. Okay. So 26, prior to any construction or preparation for construction, the applicant or owner shall establish an escrow account in the amount of $10,000 to secure future maintenance of the stormwater management system. The performance guarantee shall be in the form of surety bond or by deposit of money in the event the owner does not follow the maintenance procedures and programs contained in the, John, just a question. This is stormwater management related. So do we need this condition in the special permit?
It doesn't hurt because
Okay.
there are stormwater facilities on site.
Okay.
And I don't believe this was captured in the stormwater management permit.
Okay, then it should be. In the event that the owner does not follow the maintenance procedures and programs contained in the stormwater management permit and the long-term operation and maintenance plan, the board shall have the authority to expand any portion of said security to provide for such maintenance without consent to the applicant or owner. If the applicant or owner does not take corrective action within a reasonable period of time. Prior to the end of the initial and any subsequent surety period, the surety shall be renewed for an additional 5 years until the solar facility is decommissioned. So just one question for you, John. The $10,000 amount here doesn't initially sound like a lot, but if I read this correctly, okay, so what's typical here for a stormwater, specifically for a stormwater bond?
I don't know if there is a typical, because each site is going to be different. So the stormwater requirements for each site is going to be different. So, and what we've currently got for the condition is that they are going to estimate, it's kind of just like condition 25.
Right.
Estimate
Okay.
the amount and then
Understood.
a bond. Yeah.
Okay. So Pedro, is that reasonable that we follow the same process with an estimate and then the bond is okay. All right. 27, as required by section 210-202.1 of the zoning bylaws, the owner or operator of the solar facility shall maintain the facility in good condition. Maintenance is to include painting, structural repairs, continued compliance with the landscaping and screening requirements, and the integrity of the on-site security measures. The owner or operator shall be responsible for maintaining the access roads serving the installation site. A plan shall be submitted prior to the issuance of building permit showing the portion of land designated as open space that by the applicant's stated intent is to be conveyed to the Hopkinton Area Land Trust or other nonprofit corporation, the principal purpose of which is the conservation of open space. Pursuant to the applicant's stated intent, control of the portion of the land designated as open space as shown in the plan required by condition 27 shall be conveyed to HALT or another nonprofit corporation, the principal purpose of which is the conservation of open space through donation of the land or through the placement of a conservation restriction on the land enforceable by the town. I had one question with regards to maintenance of the facility. I'm wondering if we should also, is there some option for, I feel like we're adding a lot of bonds on here, but I'm just wondering what we have to enforce maintenance if the site is not maintained. So I guess I'm wondering if the applicant would be open to a bond for maintenance of the facility as well.
Mr. Chair, can I suggest just
Yes.
my thinking is that it's in the applicant's best interest to maintain the site so that his, the functionality and the income that he expects and hopes to gain from it. I'm not sure I feel the need for another bond, but I'm not stuck on a position. It just does seem that we have, this is within, we want him to maintain the site certainly, but if he doesn't maintain the site, then we have other mechanisms for, in worst case, closing it down and so forth.
Yeah. Muriel, you're disagreeing with me on everything tonight.
I'm just being disagreeable with you tonight, Gary.
Sorry, through the chair, I just wanted to say, I agree with what Muriel is saying because we have the landscaping performance bond and we have the stormwater performance bond. I think we covered on those things. Okay. And we haven't done it for any other solar either.
Yeah.
Not that that matters, but.
Okay. All right. And then we had two other new conditions that came up tonight. And John was kind enough to put together a quick draft here. But the first one, the applicant shall endeavor to work with HALT to establish a mutually agreeable parking area in order to access on-site trails. And we've also got to include the donation of I think it was $10,400 for construction of that. Yes, Pedro.
No, I just wanted to specify that if we're meeting that condition by making a donation, that was all, because of the language of continuing to coordinate with HALT.
Okay. So your preference would be the condition is that something to the effect of prior to commencing construction,
We have to make a
that the
donation.
applicant donate $10,400 to HALT for construction of a parking area to access trails.
Yes.
And through the chair, should we also clarify that HALT has the responsibility of identifying that parcel of land for the parking lot? Is that needed?
My instinct is I don't think it's needed. I think it's in HALT's interest and in charge to find that. That's my take.
So through the chair, HALT is not an applicant, so they wouldn't be bound by this decision.
Okay. All right, and then the last condition that I have is is related to the noise. So the applicant shall provide evidence that the decibel level of the battery storage and inverters to be measured at the property line of the nearest residential lot is below 45 decibels, which I'm guessing, John, is I don't know if
Through
you
the
just
chair,
made that up or...
that I didn't just make it up, but that is what I, in a quick Google search, found to be a normal residential neighborhood.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's actually the case. I'm not a sound engineer. I don't know this information. So that's just my first pass.
So I'll ask the applicant if they have thoughts on how best this could be worded. And I think you're aware of our intentions here.
I mean, I'll let you guys to decide, but what I could propose is just like the other bonds. We have to submit the proposal to you guys before construction, and that number has to be approved. And whatever estimate how we come up with it has to be by a professional individual, whether it's the manufacturer or sound engineer, somebody that's professional in that matter. Does that make sense?
I think John had given me some writing. I had sort of asked John a little earlier, and we'd have to, like John says, we'd have to wordsmith it, but something to the effect like the building permit could not be issued until the applicant proves the decibel level of X or the location is below X. So, and we have to define what X is, and it may be 40 decibels.
I think that's kind of what Pedro was getting at is let's have them, let's have us prior to construction commencing agree on what that decibel level is.
Okay.
And then they have to go out and demonstrate that it's less than that.
Correct.
Okay.
Gary, I just have an administrative thing.
Yes.
Condition 29 references condition 27, but it should be referencing condition 28. Because it says the plan required by.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
Makes sense to me. Thank you, Mary.
And once you're set to the chair, I have a question about the changes we're making to condition 26. Can we summarize that again?
26. Sorry, you want me to read that again?
Well, no, the changes we're making to it, if any, because I thought we were going to go with an estimate, come back with an estimate. If we come back with an estimate, why do we need the $10,000?
Through the chair, the way that I have it, we have come back with an estimate, and then it's going to be 25% of the estimate.
Okay, so the 10,000 will be removed. Thank you.
Right.
Okay. to the applicant, are those all agreeable to you?
Yes.
Okay. So I know, I'm sure that there are, actually, sorry. Well, I know that there are some folks in the public that want to make some final comments. And I assure you, we will get there. But now that we've gone through the conditions of approval, we'll take a, John, we should take a vote on the findings now, correct? And then we'll take final public comments and then close the hearing and then vote on the special permit.
You can vote the conditions and the findings and the approval at the same time. You can take public comment now, or you could do it anyway. You could vote on the findings and then take public comment.
Okay. Well, let's move to public comment, because I think that we've already had a lot of discussion around the findings and where people stand. So if we can lump those in together, that probably makes sense. So at this point, we will open it up to public comment. Just a couple of reminders. One, make sure to state your name and address. You know, and then secondly, again, just in the interest of time, we'll ask you to limit your comments to 3 minutes. And just like our town meeting, you can make an effort to state either your opinion and anything new that hasn't been previously discussed. So, Mr. Gasser, I see your hand is raised. We can unmute you.
Okay, I just a quick one on condition 29. It doesn't say anything about the time frame. Is this prior to the certificate of occupancy, prior to construction? When does this happen?
I'm looking at condition 28.
Yes, that one is clear.
Looking at 29.
I think that's a good question. I don't know if I have an answer to that. Pedro? There you go.
I had assumed that it was prior to the issuance of the certificate of occupancy.
That's what I was going to suggest.
I didn't hear that.
That it's prior to the certificate of occupancy.
It would be fine.
Okay, that's okay with you, Mr. Gasser?
Yes.
It seems reasonable to me. I know that those things can take some time, and at the end of the day, if they can't operate until that is completed, then that seems reasonable to me. Muriel, any thoughts otherwise? Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maury. The Obers, if we can unmute Gail and Scott Ober.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Scott Ober, 17 Fawn Ridge Road. And you said if we had anything new, and the new thing I have to add is I spoke to Sean McAuliffe earlier in the week regarding the letter that was submitted to this file on our concern over the potential for leaching into our groundwater in our wells, which is used for our drinking water. And I asked him, I told him I was not satisfied with what he said when he said it shouldn't be a problem, that wasn't quite good enough to let my 12-year-old drink the water. And I told him that there is research out there that shows that this is a possibility that he told me he was not aware of, and that he was going to look into it and get back to me. So I don't believe that the board has spent enough time on this issue. I think it's been glossed over like a lot of things.
John, are you aware of any additional communication, or I'm just trying to think of how we
I have
address
not
or
received
resolve this.
anything from the Board of Health after those two emails. No new information.
Okay.
So we're going to take a vote without this major potential health issue really satisfied to the neighborhood. And it just doesn't seem right. I feel like this was glossed over. More time was spent just talking about the free parking and the potential hazard to our drinking water. As a taxpayer in the town, it's very upsetting. And that's it. You're not going to hear from me again. Thank you.
So I'm wondering if there is, I'm just thinking of how we can most effectively address this. Because I do want to make sure that I do want to make sure that we understand if there is a potential health risk here. And I am fully confident in our Director of Health to evaluate that.
Barry, could you, through the chair, could you get a request for a letter from Sean stating that he feels that there's not a problem, or there, whatever his opinion is?
Yeah, and I guess the question is that let's just hypothetically say that Sean looks into this research that Mr. Ober references and says, oh, actually, I do have a concern and we've got to do something more here. And so I want to make sure that we're not inadvertently moving something along that we wouldn't be comfortable with. I'm wondering if there's a way to condition this in some capacity that, and I'm open to suggestions here on how we can ensure that Mr. McAuliffe is comfortable with it, and that if he's not comfortable with it, then there's some course of action to address it.
Through the chair, I'm not sure how to do that, so I'm not sure I'm going to be overly helpful. I do know that it is the Board of Health's responsibility to monitor and address any safety concerns for private wells. So they would be the board for to address these concerns with and to get redressed through the process. That said, I don't want to be permitting anything that causes any concern. So, I mean, possibly we could talk about including the necessity for the Board of Health to provide, I guess you said this, provide a letter affirming that they have investigated the issue and are comfortable with this permit going forward. I don't know.
That's kind of what I was thinking. Is there some way that we can?
So through the chair.
Yes, go ahead, Dave. Dave's
think
always creative with these
I think
solutions.
we're all agreeing in concept that we want to include a condition on that. So can we just, I think we have the general gist of it. Can we just add the condition and see if everybody's okay with that? I mean, that's just a general condition. We can wordsmith it later.
I'm having a hard time hearing. I apologize, Dave. I didn't hear.
Dave was suggesting that we not get too, that we not worry about we're all aligned with the idea that the health department should be comfortable that there will not be any negative effects from this development on well water. I guess I feel like when it comes to conditions, it is important that we're relatively specific here as to what we're asking. But I guess, John, I'm looking at you. I know you can't probably feel my eyes burning into yours, but what's the cleanest way for us to condition this with a health department review and of impact to well water?
It's kind of tricky because it's a different body that would be doing the work. But the only thing I can think of is prior to a building permit being issued, the Board of Health or the Health Department chair or Health Department director provides a letter certifying that this solar array will not have an adverse effect on neighborhood wells in the Fawn Ridge area.
I mean, we
through the chair.
We've come full circle.
Yeah.
Through the chair.
Yes, Sundar.
I was just curious about one thing. We know of no source of discharge of chemicals or sewage, which would be maybe two sources that could contaminate groundwater. So I'm not discounting what Mr. Ober said, but what are the sources which could cause this? And if we know what those are, could that be the basis for some conditionality in the document, which says some kind of a guarantee that there won't be any discharge of chemicals or sewage, which seems unlikely, but I'm just curious if that is the direction to go.
Yeah. Mike, you had your hand raised.
Well, we were, you kind of already have this built in, this condition built into the process itself. The Board of Health would actually have to be involved in issuing the CO. So I think this is already addressed through the actual process.
Oh, I believe you're right. We had this conversation a couple of meetings ago.
I'm wondering though, just to Mr. Ober's point, is that be too late? I mean, that's a commission. It's built already. Wouldn't it be better to have some information as to whether there is something in the fill or whatever it might be that would affect their well water prior to building it, rather than commissioning it and getting it approved? Not,
Yeah. Hang on one sec, Deb. Pedro's got his hand raised. He might have an idea or a thought.
I have no problem putting a condition where the Board of Health has to reaffirm the statements that they already provided, so that we're reassured that there's not going to be a contamination before construction, and they also have to provide the sign off after construction.
I think I'm most comfortable with that because to Deb's point, I think that it allows them to do the proper study and research prior to construction commencing. And again, they've got to approve it. They've got to review it and approve it afterwards or prior to the occupancy anyways. But I'm most comfortable with that option. I think that
forward with crafting that condition, Mr. Chairman, and just say specify before construction starts, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I agree. John, are you okay with that?
I'm typing it up right now, and hopefully I can read it to you in a 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, so prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall obtain a letter from the Hopkinton Health Department confirming there is to be no anticipated adverse impact to residential wells within the Fawn Ridge community.
Okay. Works for me. Thanks, John. And John, you said I just saw a note you had something you wanted to go over on condition 31.
Yeah, so I did a little wordsmithing on that one. So I just want to make sure it was agreeable to the board before we moved on from this one.
Move on. Could I ask a question through the chair about the private wells?
Mm-hmm.
Are there other private wells in the vicinity? Not just on Fun Ridge? I presume the other homes are on private wells too. I guess
Would it
I wouldn't limit it to Fawn Ridge.
Would it be
Maybe change it
worth?
to with impact to residential wells of abutters.
Yes. And Pedro just gave us the thumbs up. Good catch, Muriel. All right, and John, do you have that reworded language, or should we go to the next public comments?
Yes, I do have it. So this is 31, condition 31. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall provide the board with an estimate of a reasonable sound level for a residential neighborhood to be reviewed by the board's engineer and subject to approval by the board. The applicant shall provide evidence that the decibel level of the battery storage and inverters to be measured at the property line of the nearest residential lot is below the decibel level established through this review prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy.
Well done. Okay. Let's move back to the comments. We have, gosh, and I apologize, I don't remember the name that goes with Bianta. But Bianta, once you're unmuted, please state your name and address, and the mic is yours. Hang on one second. Oh, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, my name's Bob. I own 50 Franklin Road. I just wanted to point out a couple of things that I observed through the meeting and some concerns that I still have. One is the thing we've just been discussing about the private wells and groundwater in general. I think this condition you're talking about should be, yes, focused on private wells, but it also should consider the rest of the groundwater, which affects a very large aquifer. I mean, the whole area here, the whole region is riddled with wetlands. So I don't know how you word that, but I think you need some further wordsmithing to be sure that it isn't just restricted to the private wells. It's going to affect lots of stuff. Another observation I had is that earlier in the meeting, I heard members of the board talk about things like that the solar array is preferable to residential development or something like to that effect. And I really just hope that that's not part of your criteria when you take your vote, because the idea that the board might consider solar energy projects as a bulwark against growth of population in the town is just, to my way of thinking, wrong-headed. That should not be a reason for permitting solar applications. If you want to limit growth of population, you have to do that some other method, but you don't do it by blocking housing development with solar arrays. Another thing I'd like to observe is that I'm sorry, I apologize. I wasn't able to unmute or to raise a flag during the discussion about batteries, but I think that should be given more thought. I think those lithium-ion batteries, we all think of them as ubiquitous and so harmless, and I think that's really not true. I'd like to point out that there was an incident in the last 2 or 3 years where there were large quantities of lithium-ion batteries on Boeing aircraft that had to be redesigned and removed. And I'm sure they had those batteries contained in environmental units that were like a packing crate on steroids, but it still became a problem. And I think that's a danger. And I think no matter how well we think we've protected ourselves against fire in a battery array and what it might do to the environment and the surrounding area, unforeseen things can happen. And I think that's why installations like this don't belong in sensitive locations, like next to wetlands or on top of wetlands, in a forest, or in a residential neighborhood. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Ianta. Next up, Mr. Robertson. And hang on one sec, we'll unmute you. All right, Mr. Robertson, go ahead.
Yes, I mean, I have to to agree with both Bianca and Mr. Ober concerning their concerns. And my concern right now in hearing the board deliberations is that there's a rush to judgment here with the desire to put in specific conditions where the board has not been fully informed of what those conditions mean, and in fact where those conditions are where people who are opining on creating the wording are saying, I think and I will, I hope, this seems right, and it's not considered, and you cannot possibly rush to vote on that. And furthermore, if just getting to my the letter that I sent to Mr. Trendle, outlining the various concerns that I have outside of the concerns that have already been stated here. I guess from a procedural standpoint, I'd like to know if the board members have had an opportunity to review that testimony, and if not, because I think it's central to being able to appropriately vote on this item, I would like to take the opportunity to read that testimony, or ask that the board agree to read that testimony prior to closing this public testimony, public hearing, and asking for a vote. And if I'm not allowed to do that, I would like the opportunity to just specify one particular area of the applicant's the application, which precludes the board from actually voting in the affirmative for this permit. And I'm willing to do that. It's part of my my letter. So I'd ask you now, would you prefer me to read my letter or to read my excerpt from that letter concerning this one particular area?
So, Mr. Robertson, I did share your letter with the broader group, and it's in the meeting folder. It is a 38-page letter, so I don't know if everyone has read it. We typically require content to be included in the packet be submitted earlier so that people do have time to review the materials. That being said, you know, I'm more than happy for you to share that primary point that you would like to make.
Okay, so it is the applicant's obligation, according to Hopkinton bylaws, to prove with a preponderance of credible evidence that this project is in compliance with the Wetlands Protection Act. Their application is silent on the impact of wildlife, wildlife habitats, and recreational values protected by these acts. Therefore, it has provided no proof, and the burden of proof, per the Hopkinton bylaws, responsibility. So, in order for you to opine on the mitigations or to approve this application, you have to be able to, the applicant is required by law to supply with a preponderance of credible evidence that it will not impact the wildlife and wildlife habitats and recreational values of resource areas. And nobody has made that, has provided that credible evidence. And there's certainly been no independent study by any of the, by the board that has been requisitioned. So if that application right now, if you were to vote on this application right now, you would be duty bound to reject the application because it does not provide that proof. And the second comment is more in relation to what I heard as a procedural issue, which is public safety, health, and welfare, and that zoning requirement does not have to require the does not have to deal with the detriment of property values and other such detriments to health and safety is wrong and has been supported by numerous jurisdictions as saying that the welfare is important to the community, and the solar farms can be rejected based upon that community detriment. And it should be understandable to all of you in the fact that the solar overlay is being disputed, that the community understands and wants to protect the public health and safety of its residents by enacting solar restrictions. And so this permit should in fact take into account those considerations. And in fact should take into account all the testimony that has been accumulated by the planning board from the solar overlay deliberations.
Okay.
And to the last point, as far as the seaboard providing and being such a good neighbor and being and negotiating in good faith. They may have negotiated in good faith with certain parties and with the board on certain issues, but with the community at large, they have not operated in good faith. This is in my letter, but we reached out to them as a community organization, and we're rebuffed and told that there was no way that they were going to exercise any of the appeasements and mitigations that we suggested because it was going to have a negative impact on
Okay.
their solar.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson.
production.
And I just will want to provide two quick comments. One, we've been through this hearing process for I think almost 6 months now. So we have put a lot of time into this. And I will say that I think the primary new consideration that was brought up tonight with regards to safety of well water, at the end of the day, the only formal communication we have from the health department is that they don't have any concerns about it, but I think that we are doing our best to accommodate the concerns of abutters by adding an additional condition to make sure that we're clear there. But are there any other? I don't see any other comments from the public. So at this point, sorry, John.
Tom Robertson re-raised his hand. I don't know if you want to call back or if we are moving on from public comment.
Okay. Tom, do you have? You go ahead and unmute him, and I don't want to discourage people from participating, but my one ask, Tom, is again that we, I let you run a little long last time. You went from 1 point to 3, so I'll go ahead and let you finish your thoughts.
Well, I just feel it's appropriate to be able to respond to what you just said. This comment about public well water has not been a new comment that's been brought up tonight. It has been in January, it was brought up, and in several meetings after that, it's been brought up. And it's not the board's responsibility at this point to provide conditions that somehow address that. The board's responsibility to all these points that have been brought up is to evaluate them before establishing accepting a permit.
Okay. Tom, I appreciate that input. We did address that by reaching out to the health department and asking for their input on this. So it's not being addressed through the condition. It's being addressed by asking the health department for their professional opinion.
But the health department.
So no, we're not going to argue about it. We took action months ago. We reached out to the health department. We got their professional opinion. And I think we're making reasonable concessions to ensure that if there is some new information that the health department was not aware of, that we are protecting any of the abutters, that do draw off well water, from that property. So I think that we're okay there. Okay, so at this point, we've wrapped up the final public comment. We still need to vote on the findings and on the special permits, but John, I think at this point, I can entertain a motion to close this public hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
Okay. Any further discussion?
So I did have one point of discussion, just listening to the public speak. I just wanted to ask the board what they thought about adding a little bit more other than well water for the verification from the department. Because Gary, you made all good points. We're not experts in public health. We're deferring to them. But I just want to make sure that we're not overly specific. And, I think the first public speaker mentioned like other ecosystems or something like that. I don't know if anybody has some input as to cover a little bit more from the Department of Health. Board of Health.
I think the challenging part is that we also start to tread into the jurisdiction of Conservation Commission as well. I guess my interpretation of that was that Mr. Ober's primary concern was safety of well water.
Right.
And if there's research that suggests that the solar developments could have a negative impact on well water, then I want to make sure that we understand that and that we've considered that and taken action as appropriate. As we look at impacts to wildlife and whatnot, to me, that really falls into the expertise of the Conservation Commission, which has approved this with a number of additional conditions.
I totally agree. Now that you bring up that point, I just wanted to mention it and discuss it, so I'm comfortable with that answer.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have a motion and a second, so we'll move to a roll call vote to close the public hearing. Gary Trendle, yes. Dave Paul?
Dave Paul, yes.
Muriel Kramer?
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Jane Moran?
Jane Moran, yes.
Mary Larson Marlowe?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb Feinberg?
Deb Feinberg, yes.
And actually, does Sundar vote on closing the hearing? I don't think he does. Okay. All right. So, and now we will move to the findings and vote with conditions. And John, we can do those all in one vote. Just confirming.
Yes. So I will put a condition on my yes, you can do that. I guess if the board is looking to approve it, that shouldn't be an issue. If the board is looking to deny it, I would do them as two separate votes.
Okay. So based on our previous conversation, I'm gonna recommend we do this as one vote. So let me see if I can get this wording right, but I move that the board finds that the proposed commercial solar photovoltaic installation conforms to the provisions of Article 31, that the proposed commercial solar photovoltaic installation will not be detrimental to the neighborhood or the town, and that the environmental features of the site and surrounding areas are protected, and specifically surrounding areas will be protected from the proposed use by provision of adequate surface water drainage. Additionally, the board finds that the granting of the special permit satisfies the requirements of section 210-223G, that all applicable criteria and standards set forth in this chapter have been satisfied, and that the granting of the special permit will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of this chapter.
I will make the motion that Gary just detailed out beautifully.
Dave Paul, second.
And do you want me to also, let's do it in two separate votes, Gary.
Okay. So then the motion is specifically for the findings. And we have so Mary, you're gonna motion and Dave, you'll second that. Any discussion on the findings themselves? Okay, so we'll move to a roll call vote. Gary Trendle, yes. Dave Paul?
Dave Paul, yes.
Muriel Kramer?
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Jane Moran?
Jane Moran, yes.
Mary Lasser Marlowe,
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb Feinberg.
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Okay. And at this point, I'll entertain a motion to approve the proposed special permit for 71 Franklin Road with the conditions as outlined in this meeting this evening.
I will make that motion and also include the conditions as drafted. So they weren't necessarily included in the outline, but the conditions as agreed to at this meeting and in the discussion.
Dave Paul, second.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, I think it's condition number 1 with the sound decibels. John, could you read that one again? I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't just on the occasion of the installation, that we are aware of the decibels prior to the installation. Oh, he's muted.
I'm reading condition 31, correct?
Yes.
That's the one for the decibels, correct?
Prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall provide the board with an estimate of a reasonable sound level for a residential neighborhood to be reviewed by the board's engineer and subject to approval by the board. The applicant shall provide evidence that the decibel level of the battery storage and inverters to be measured at the property line of the nearest residential lot is below the decibel level established through this review prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy.
Very well done. Good. Okay.
Okay, so we will move to roll call vote. Gary Trendle, yes. Dave Paul,
Paul, yes.
Muriel Kramer,
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Jane Moran,
Jane Moran, yes.
Mary Larson Marlowe,
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
and Deb Feinberg.
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Okay, so this one did take super majority, so it took 6 out of 9 votes to pass, and it received 6 votes. So the special permit is approved. So I know it's late, and I'm not going to talk really long here, but I know this was a very complicated process for us, and I do sincerely appreciate everyone's patience, their thoughtfulness, their engagement, and you know, I think I feel like we continue to get better with these, and you know, hopefully we can feel like we made the right decision given all the information that was presented and worked through this hearing process. So Muriel, I know it's late, so I'm going to recommend that we postpone the discussion on the master plan until the August 10th meeting.
Yeah, I agree. And what I think that I just like to run by you really in 7 seconds or less is that I will send an email with my thoughts and the plan that I laid out so people are prepared. And then just ask if it's possible that we have at least a half hour to talk about it the first time so that we can substantively agree on the process and make some progress so we get a feel for it if that works out at the next meeting.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. So
the chair, just a question. Is this a new master plan or are we working off the old master plan?
No.
Working off the old one.
All I have put together, Jane, is a way to track the status. And I'm putting some recommendations that I am not married to in any way, but just to start the discussion for each of the action items so that we can work through them. We can just march through them as a board and have a plan for each one of them. If that makes sense. So I just wanted to take a shot at it. If people want to make an adjustment to it, I'm going to welcome that, right? We needed to start somewhere. So that's all I'm trying to do is make sure that we have an actionable plan to track the status on these action items.
I'll look forward to your email. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
Oh, will you say that now, Jane?
So at this point, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Seconded.
Paul.
Discussion, if not, we'll roll call vote. Gary Trendle, yes. Dave Paul,
Dave Paul, yes.
Muriel Kramer,
Earl Kramer, yes.
Jane Moran,
Maureen, yes, congratulations.
Mary Larson Marlowe,
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb Feinberg,
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
and Sundar Sivarman.
Sundar, yes.
Okay. Thanks, everyone, and have a good evening.
All right.
Stay safe, everyone. Congratulations.